Atlantis. Somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules, past the edge of the known world, lay an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. At least that's what Plato told us around 360 BCE, and humanity has been obsessed with the idea ever since. Atlantis wasn't just any island. It was a circular paradise ringed with alternating bands of water and land like nature's own geometric puzzle. The Atlanteans lived in the centre ring, surrounded by walls plated with brass, tin, and a mysterious metal called auric halcum that gleamed like fire. Their palace sat at the heart of it all, a monument to engineering that would make modern architects weep with envy. Hot and cold springs bubbled up from the earth, feeding elaborate bathhouses where citizens could wash away the dust of their remarkable civilization. These weren't primitive islanders scraping by on coconuts and fish. The Atlanteans had conquered parts of Europe and Africa, commanded fleets that ruled the Mediterranean, and built a society so advanced it seemed almost magical. Their engineers carved tunnels through solid rock, their farmers grew crops in perfectly planned fields, and their architects designed temples that reached toward the heavens with mathematical precision. But here's where things get interesting. Plato presented this story as historical fact, passed down through generations from the Egyptian priests to the Greek statesman Solon, then to Plato's own family. He described Atlantis with the meticulous detail of a city planner, down to the measurements of walls and the organization of military districts. Either Plato was the most creative fiction writer in ancient history, or he was preserving the memory of something real. The timeline he gave places Atlantis around 9600 BCE, making it older than any known civilization. This was a time when most of humanity was still figuring out agriculture. Yet Atlantis supposedly had a complex government, advanced metallurgy, and naval technology sophisticated enough to threaten the ancient world. The math alone should make us skeptical, but the details are so vivid they feel almost like documentary evidence. What destroyed this paradise? Divine justice, according to Plato. The Atlanteans had grown corrupt and aggressive, their hearts hardened by wealth and power. In a single day and night, earthquakes and floods swallowed the entire island, leaving nothing but an impassable muddy sea. The gods had quite literally pulled the plug on humanity's first great experiment in civilization. The search for Atlantis has taken explorers everywhere from the Mediterranean to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Some point to Santorini, where a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BCE destroyed a sophisticated Bronze Age civilization. Others look to submerged cities off the coast of Spain, or megalithic structures in the Atlantic that might once have been above water. The problem is that every discovery seems to lack something essential to Plato's account. Santorini is too small, too recent, and in the wrong ocean. The underwater formations near Bimini look impressive in photographs, but turn out to be natural rock formations when examined closely. The more we search for a literal Atlantis, the more elusive it becomes. Perhaps that's the point. Plato was a philosopher, not a historian, and he used stories to explore ideas about ideal societies and the dangers of unchecked power. Atlantis might have been his thought experiment about what happens when civilization reaches its peak and then overreaches. The island that was swallowed by the sea could be a metaphor for the cycle of rise and fall that governs all human societies. Yet something about the story refuses to let go of our imagination. Maybe it's the longing for a lost golden age, or the hope that somewhere in our past humanity got things right for a while. Every new underwater discovery, every ancient ruin that doesn't quite fit established timelines, sparks whispers of Atlantis. We want to believe that once, just once, we built something perfect. The search continues in laboratories and lecture halls, where archaeologists piece together evidence of advanced prehistoric civilizations that might have inspired Plato's tale. Recent discoveries of sophisticated stone circles in Turkey, underwater cities in the Mediterranean, and evidence of global sea level changes all add pieces to a puzzle that may never be complete. But perhaps the real Atlantis was never a place at all. It was an idea, a dream of human potential that has inspired explorers, scientists and dreamers for over 2 millennia. And in that sense, Atlantis has never been lost. It lives on in every ambitious architecture project, every attempt to build a perfect society, and every expedition that seeks to push beyond the known boundaries of our world. The island may have vanished beneath the waves, but the story endures. just as Plato intended, perhaps when he first set pen to papyrus and gave humanity its most enduring mystery. The Maya. Deep in the rainforests of Central America, where howler monkeys announce each dawn and cecropia trees stretch toward filtered sunlight, the Maya built one of history's most sophisticated civilizations. They did this without metal tools, without wheels for transport, and without large domesticated animals. Apparently they decided to achieve greatness the hard way. For over 2,000 years, Maya cities rose from jungle floors like stone dreams made manifest. Tikal's pyramids reached toward the canopy, their steep steps climbing nearly 200 feet into the air. Palenque nestled into hillsides with an artist's eye for natural beauty, its palaces and temples flowing with the landscape rather than dominating it. At Chichen Itza, the Great Pyramid cast shadows that traced the movements of celestial bodies with mathematical precision. The Maya understood time in ways that would make modern astronomers envious. Their calendar system tracked multiple cycles simultaneously, weaving together solar years, ritual periods, and vast cosmic ages that stretched millions of years into the past and future. They predicted eclipses centuries in advance, calculated the orbit of Venus to within hours of modern measurements, and developed a concept of zero independently of other civilizations. Their writing system was equally remarkable. Maya scribes created the only fully developed writing system in pre-Columbian America, using hundreds of intricate glyphs that could represent sounds, syllables, or entire concepts. These symbols decorated temple walls, stone monuments, and bark paper books with poetry, history, and astronomical observations. Reading Maya text is like deciphering the thoughts of an alien intelligence that happened to share our planet. Yet for all their intellectual achievements, the Maya were intensely practical people. They turned swamplands into productive farmland using raised field systems that are still being discovered by archaeologists. They carved elaborate canal networks to manage water in both wet and dry seasons. In the Yucatan, where surface water is scarce, they built impressive reservoirs and learned to predict where underground cenotes could provide access to groundwater. Maya society was far from the peaceful astronomer priests that early scholars imagined. Their cities were locked in constant warfare, forming shifting alliances that make European medieval politics look straightforward. Kings with names like Jasochanquawil and Lady Six Sky led armies into battle, captured rivals for elaborate sacrificial ceremonies, and commissioned monuments celebrating their victories with an enthusiasm that bordered on bragging. The ball game held special significance in Maya culture, though calling it a game understates its cosmic importance. Players propelled a solid rubber ball through stone hoops using only their hips, forearms, and shoulders, reenacting the mythical struggle between gods and demons. Some games ended with ritual sacrifice, though whether winners or losers met this fate remains debated. Maya mythology suggests that the outcome determined the fate of the sun itself. Their cities grew to impressive sizes without the centralized planning we associate with urban development. Caracol housed over 100,000 people at its peak, while Tikal commanded territories that stretched for miles in every direction. These weren't just ceremonial centers visited by rural farmers, but complex urban environments with residential neighborhoods, workshops, markets, and administrative buildings that functioned like ancient downtowns. Then, around 900 CE, something went wrong. Maya cities in the southern lowlands began to empty. Construction projects stopped mid-completion, leaving half-finished pyramids and abandoned palaces to the encroaching jungle. Population levels dropped dramatically, and many urban centers were simply walked away from, as if their inhabitants had collectively decided to try life elsewhere. The causes of this classic Maya collapse remain hotly debated. Climate data suggest severe droughts struck the region repeatedly. Soil samples indicate deforestation and agricultural exhaustion. Political inscriptions hint at increasing warfare and social instability. Perhaps all these factors combined into a perfect storm of environmental and social stress that overwhelmed even Maya ingenuity. But the Maya didn't disappear, despite what popular accounts sometimes suggest. Northern cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan continued to flourish for centuries. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, they encountered vibrant Maya communities that had adapted to changing conditions while maintaining their cultural identity. Today, millions of people in Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, and Honduras speak Maya languages and preserve traditions that stretch back to those jungle pyramids. Recent discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of Maya achievements. LiDAR technology has revealed vast networks of cities connected by raised stone roads. New translations of Maya texts provide insights into their philosophy, science, and daily life. Underground cave systems yield evidence of ritual practices that connected earthly ceremonies with cosmic beliefs. The Maya created something remarkable in those jungle cities. They proved that human ingenuity could flourish without the technological toolkit that we consider essential for civilization. Their legacy lives on not just in the pyramids that pierce the rainforest canopy, but in the mathematical concepts, orogenical insights, and artistic achievements that continue to influence our understanding of what ancient peoples could accomplish when they set their minds to reaching for the stars. The Trojans. On a hill overlooking the Dardanelles, where Asia meets Europe and ancient trade routes funneled the wealth of empires, stood the city that launched 1,000 ships and a few thousand years of scholarly debate. Troy, or Ilios as its inhabitants called it, occupied one of the most strategically valuable pieces of real estate in the ancient world. Anyone wanting to move goods between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea had to pass through the narrow strait below its walls. For most of history, Troy existed primarily in the realm of poetry. Homer's Iliad painted vivid pictures of bronze-armoured heroes dueling outside massive walls, of Hector's final stand and Achilles' terrible wrath, of a wooden horse that sealed the fate of a proud city. Most scholars treated these tales as pure fiction, beautiful stories about imaginary people in an imaginary place. Then Heinrich Schliemann arrived with a shovel and an obsession. Schliemann was not by any stretch a careful archaeologist. He dug through the ancient site at Hazalik like a man possessed, destroying layers of history in his enthusiasm to reach what he believed was Homer's Troy. His methods would horrify modern excavators, but his instincts proved remarkably sound. Beneath the Turkish soil lay not one city, but 9 distinct settlements built one atop another across more than 3,000 years. The Trojans who lived in these cities were master traders who understood that geography is destiny. Their location allowed them to control shipping traffic through the Dardanelles, collecting tolls and taxes that funded impressive fortifications and luxurious palaces. Archaeological evidence suggests they maintained trading relationships that stretched from the Baltic Sea to Central Asia, making Troy a cosmopolitan hub centuries before such terms existed. The city that archaeologists call Troy the Six, dating to around 1700 to 1250 BCE, matches Homer's descriptions with unsettling accuracy. Massive walls built from precisely cut limestone blocks ringed the citadel, rising over 20 feet high and thick enough for chariots to race along the top. The eastern gate, where Homer placed many of his most dramatic scenes, shows evidence of repeated repairs and reinforcement, suggesting it saw considerable military action. Inside these walls lived a society sophisticated enough to import goods from across the known world. Mycenaean pottery mingles with local Trojan ceramics in archaeological layers, indicating regular contact with the Greeks who would later become their legendary enemies. Gold jewelry, bronze weapons, and exotic materials like amber and ivory speak to wealth that could only come from controlling lucrative trade networks. The Trojans developed their own distinctive culture while absorbing influences from neighbouring civilizations. Their pottery shows artistic traditions that evolved over centuries, blending Anatolian styles with innovations borrowed from trading partners. Religious artifacts suggest they worshipped both local deities and gods imported from other cultures, creating a spiritual landscape as cosmopolitan as their commercial one. Around 1250 BCE, Troy VI met a violent end. The archaeological evidence shows clear signs of earthquake damage followed by destruction through warfare. Arrowheads litter the ruins, skeletons were found in positions suggesting they died violently, and signs of burning indicate that much of the city went up in flames. The timing aligns remarkably well with ancient Greek traditions about the Trojan War, though connecting archaeological destruction to specific literary events remains speculative. Troy VII, built on the ruins of its predecessor, was a more cramped and modest affair. The Trojans rebuilt quickly but never regained their former prosperity. This later city also shows signs of violent destruction around 1180 BCE, during the period when mysterious sea peoples were disrupting civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Perhaps the Trojans fell victim to these maritime raiders. or perhaps old enemies finally succeeded where Agamemnon's forces had allegedly triumphed generations earlier. The real Trojans likely bore little resemblance to Homer's Bronze Age superheroes. They were pragmatic merchants and skilled craftsmen who built their prosperity on geographic advantages and commercial acumen. Their warriors fought with real weapons that chipped and dulled. Their kings worried about trade revenues and diplomatic alliances, and their daily lives centered on the prosaic business of moving goods and managing a complex urban economy. Yet something about their story captured the Greek imagination so completely that it became the foundation myth of Western literature. Whether the Trojan War happened as Homer described it, or whether the poet wove together folk memories of various conflicts into one epic tale, the historical Trojans provided the raw material for humanity's first great war story. Modern excavations continue to reveal new details about Trojan life and culture. Each season brings fresh insights into their technology, their social organization, and their relationships with neighboring peoples. The mound at Hisarlik still holds secrets about these ancient traders who built their city at the crossroads of continents and found themselves immortalized in verse. Perhaps that's the most fitting monument to the Trojans. They sought to control a strategic waterway and build commercial prosperity, practical goals that made perfect sense for their time and place. Instead, they achieved a different kind of immortality, becoming the eternal symbols of a city that stood too long against impossible odds, defending walls that could not hold forever against the relentless siege of time and human ambition. Easter Island. In the vast emptiness of the Pacific Ocean, over 2,000 miles from the nearest populated land, sits a triangular speck of volcanic rock that shouldn't matter to anyone. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui as its inhabitants call it, is one of the most isolated places humans have ever chosen to call home. Yet this remote dot of land produced one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries, nearly 900 stone giants that stand sentinel across the landscape like ancient guards waiting for orders that never came. The Moai, as these statues are known, weren't carved yesterday. Between 1250 and 1500 CE, Polynesian settlers on this 64-square-mile island somehow found the time, energy and motivation to quarry, carve and transport these massive monuments across difficult terrain. The largest completed Moai stands 33 feet tall and weighs over 80 tons. Even the average statue would require a modern crane to move safely. These weren't primitive people working with stone hammers and unlimited time. The Rapa Nui developed a sophisticated society complete with a complex social hierarchy, advanced agricultural techniques, and a writing system called Rongorongo that remains largely undeciphered. They transformed a barren volcanic landscape into productive farmland, supporting a population that may have reached 15,000 people at its peak. The Moai themselves represent a staggering investment of human effort. Archaeologists estimate that carving a typical statue required a team of 5 or 6 sculptors working full-time for about a year. That's just the carving. Moving these monuments from the quarry at Rana Raraku to their final positions around the island presented engineering challenges that would strain modern equipment. Some Moai travelled over 10 miles from where they were carved. Recent experiments have revealed that the Rapa Nui likely walked their statues to their destinations using an ingenious rocking technique. Teams of workers manipulated ropes attached to the Moai's heads, causing the statues to rock forward step by step in an upright position. It sounds impossible until you see it demonstrated, at which point it merely sounds improbable. The islanders had apparently solved a logistics problem that would challenge modern engineers. But here's where the story gets darker. When European explorers first encountered Easter Island in 1722, they found a largely deforested landscape supporting only about 3,000 people. Many Moai had been toppled from their platforms, and the society that created them seemed to have collapsed into warfare and social chaos. The island that had once supported a thriving civilization capable of monumental architecture now struggled to feed a fraction of its former population. The traditional explanation for this decline became a cautionary tale about environmental destruction. According to this narrative, the Rapa Nui cut down all their trees to transport Moai, destroying their ecosystem and triggering societal collapse. It's a neat story that fits modern anxieties about sustainability, but like many neat stories, it oversimplifies a complex reality. More recent research suggests that environmental degradation was only part of the story. The arrival of Polynesian rats, probably stowaways on the original colonizing canoes, may have prevented forest regeneration by eating palm seeds. Climate change during the Little Ice Age brought cooler temperatures and altered rainfall patterns. Most devastatingly, contact with Europeans introduced diseases that decimated the population and led to slave raids that removed many of the island's most knowledgeable inhabitants. The Moai themselves may have played a different role than originally imagined. Rather than being symbols of chiefly power or religious devotion, some scholars now believe they were associated with fertility and agricultural productivity. Many statues are positioned near fresh water sources or productive agricultural areas. Their presence might have been intended to ensure good harvest rather than intimidate enemies or honour ancestors. The mystery deepens when you consider what the Moai were meant to represent. Most face inland, watching over the island rather than gazing out to sea. Their elongated heads, prominent noses and stern expressions follow consistent artistic conventions, but they don't appear to be portraits of specific individuals. Instead, they seem to embody some ideal of ancestral authority or spiritual power that was important enough to justify centuries of monumental effort. Excavations around the Moai have revealed that many of these heads actually have bodies buried beneath centuries of soil accumulation. Some buried torsos bear petroglyphs and carvings that provide additional clues about their meaning and function. The full scope of Rapa Nui artistic achievement is only now being understood as archaeologists carefully uncover these hidden details. The Rongorongo writing system adds another layer to the mystery. These intricate glyphs carved on wooden tablets may represent the only indigenous writing system developed in Polynesia. Unfortunately, the knowledge of how to read Rongorongo died with the last practitioners in the 19th century, leaving modern scholars to puzzle over symbols that might contain crucial information about Rapa Nui history and beliefs. Today, Easter Island stands as a testament to both human ingenuity and the fragility of isolated societies. The Moai continue their eternal watch over an island that has seen triumph and tragedy, creation and destruction, all played out on a stage so remote that the rest of the world remained unaware of the drama for centuries. In their silent presence, these stone giants remind us that even in the most unlikely places, humans will find ways to reach for something greater than mere survival. The Minoans. In the azure waters of the Mediterranean, where dolphins still dance in the wake of passing ships, the island of Crete once hosted Europe's first great civilization. The Minoans, as archaeologists have named them, built a society so advanced and sophisticated that when Sir Arthur Evans first uncovered their ruins in the early 1900s, he could hardly believe what he was seeing. Here was a Bronze Age culture with flush toilets, multi-storey buildings and frescoes so vibrant they seemed painted yesterday. The Palace of Knossos sprawled across 6 acres like an ancient shopping mall designed by someone with excellent taste and unlimited resources. Its corridors twisted and turned through hundreds of rooms, creating a labyrinthine layout that may have inspired the later Greek myth of the Minotaur. Light wells brought sunshine deep into the interior, while sophisticated drainage systems carried away wastewater with an efficiency that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for over a millennium. Minoan artists covered palace walls with scenes that radiate joy and prosperity. Young men and women leap over charging bulls in displays of athletic prowess that would make modern gymnasts nervous. Dolphins swim through underwater gardens. Priestesses handle sacred serpents with confident grace. And processions of gift-bearers carry elaborate offerings through landscapes dotted with lilies and crocuses. If these frescoes are accurate, the Minoans lived in a world where art and nature existed in perfect harmony. Their society appears to have been remarkably peaceful, at least by Bronze Age standards. Minoan cities lacked the massive fortification walls that protected other contemporary civilizations. Instead of depicting warfare and conquest, their art celebrates religious ceremonies, athletic competitions, and the natural world. Women held prominent positions in society, serving as priestesses and possibly rulers centuries before such roles became common elsewhere in the ancient world. The Minoans were master traders who turned their island location into a commercial advantage. Their ships carried goods throughout the eastern Mediterranean, establishing trading posts and colonies that spread Minoan influence from Egypt to Asia Minor. They imported gold from Egypt, silver from Anatolia, copper from Cyprus, and tin from distant lands, combining these materials into bronze objects of extraordinary beauty and craftsmanship. Their writing system, known as Linear A, remains one of archaeology's most frustrating puzzles. Hundreds of clay tablets covered with these elegant symbols have been discovered in Minoan palaces, clearly documenting some aspect of palace administration or religious practice. Despite decades of scholarly effort, Linear A stubbornly refuses to yield its secrets. We can see that the Minoans were literate and bureaucratic, but we cannot read their actual words. Around 1450 BCE, Minoan civilization suffered a catastrophic blow. The exact cause remains debated, but the effects were unmistakable. Palaces were destroyed, settlements abandoned, and the sophisticated culture that had flourished for over 500 years suddenly collapsed. Some scholars point to the massive volcanic eruption on nearby Thera, modern Santorini, that sent tsunamis racing across the Mediterranean and buried parts of Crete under volcanic ash. Others suggest that Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland took advantage of Minoan weakness to invade and conquer the island. The appearance of Linear B script, which records an early form of Greek in later Cretan palaces, supports this theory. Perhaps natural disaster weakened Minoan defences enough to allow foreign conquest, combining environmental catastrophe with human opportunism. The religious practices of the Minoans centred around a goddess figure often depicted with snakes, suggesting connections to earth fertility and natural cycles. Sacred bulls played important roles in ceremonies, possibly related to the bull-leaping athletic events shown in palace frescoes. Mountain peak sanctuaries and sacred caves provided settings for rituals that may have involved offerings, dancing, and communion with divine forces. Minoan craftsmanship reached levels that wouldn't be surpassed for centuries. Their pottery featured delicate marine motifs and flowing natural designs. Gold jewellery displayed technical sophistication that rivals modern techniques. Stone vessels were carved from single blocks of marble or serpentine, with walls so thin they seem almost transparent. These weren't the products of primitive artisans, but of specialists working within a highly developed artistic tradition. The influence of Minoan culture spread far beyond Crete itself. Minoan-style frescoes appear in palaces throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Their artistic motifs influenced Egyptian wall paintings and influenced the development of Mycenaean Greek art. Even after their political power vanished, Minoan cultural innovations continued to shape Mediterranean civilization for centuries. Recent underwater archaeology has revealed submerged Minoan harbours and settlements along the Cretan coast, providing new insights into their maritime capabilities and trading networks. Advanced imaging techniques continue to uncover previously unknown rooms and corridors in Minoan palaces, while new finds of Linear A tablets offer fresh hope for eventually deciphering their mysterious script. The Minoans created something unique in the Bronze Age world. A civilization that seemed to prioritise beauty, prosperity, and peaceful trade over military conquest and monumental displays of royal power. Whether this peaceful image reflects historical reality or simply the accidents of archaeological preservation, their legacy endures in the graceful art and sophisticated architecture that still speaks to us across nearly 4,000 years of Mediterranean sunlight. Pompeii. On a sunny morning in August of 79 CE, the citizens of Pompeii woke up in one of the Roman Empire's most prosperous resort towns. By nightfall, their city had vanished beneath 20 feet of volcanic ash and pumice, creating history's most perfectly preserved snapshot of ancient daily life. Mount Vesuvius had been rumbling for days, but earthquakes were common in the region. The mountain had been quiet for so long that vines grew on its slopes and people built villas in its shadow, treating it more like scenic backdrop than sleeping giant. Pompeii wasn't some remote provincial outpost. This was a thriving commercial centre of about 20,000 people, blessed with fertile volcanic soil and a strategic location near the Bay of Naples. Wealthy Romans built luxurious vacation homes here, complete with elaborate gardens, private baths, and dining rooms designed for hosting impressive dinner parties. The city boasted theatres, an amphitheatre, multiple bathhouses, and a forum where business and politics mixed in typical Roman fashion. The streets were paved with polygonal stone blocks. Raised sidewalks kept pedestrians above the muck, and stepping stones allowed people to cross roads without getting their feet wet when it rained. An intricate system of lead pipes brought fresh water from distant springs, while carefully engineered sewers carried waste away. For a city that was nearly 2,000 years old when Vesuvius erupted, Pompeii had infrastructure that would impress modern urban planners. When the volcano finally exploded around noon on August 24th, It sent a column of ash and gas 15 miles into the sky. The prevailing wind carried this deadly cloud southeast, directly over Pompeii. What followed was like being buried alive by a hot, poisonous snowstorm that fell at a rate of 6 inches per hour. Buildings collapsed under the weight, people suffocated from toxic gases, and an entire city simply disappeared from the landscape. The volcanic ash that killed Pompeii also preserved it with remarkable fidelity. Organic materials rotted away over the centuries, but they left perfect moulds in the hardened ash. When 18th century excavators poured plaster into these voids, they created haunting casts of Pompeians at the moment of death. A dog strains against its chain, a family huddles together in their final moments, a gladiator lies fallen in his barracks. These aren't abstract historical figures, but real people caught in tragedy. The preservation extends far beyond these dramatic human remains. Loaves of bread still sit on bakery counters, their crusts charred but recognizable. Wine jars bear labels indicating vintage and origin. Graffiti covers walls with messages ranging from political slogans to declarations of love to complaints about bad service. Reading Pompeian graffiti is like scrolling through an ancient social media feed, complete with crude jokes and personal grievances. The houses reveal intimate details about Roman domestic life that no literary source could provide. In the Villa of the Papyri, archaeologists found the only intact ancient library containing scrolls of Greek philosophy that are still being carefully unrolled and read using modern technology. Kitchen utensils, cosmetic tools, children's toys, and medical instruments show us what Romans actually used in their daily lives rather than what elite authors thought worthy of mention. Pompeii's economy depended on more than tourism and agriculture. The city was a manufacturing centre that produced garum, a fermented fish sauce that Romans considered essential for proper cooking. Textile workshops processed wool and manufactured clothing for export throughout the empire. Bakeries, taverns and shops lined every major street, creating a commercial landscape that would feel familiar to modern city dwellers. The social dynamics revealed by Pompeian houses challenge some assumptions about Roman society. Wealthy homes often contain sophisticated artwork and luxury goods, but even modest dwellings show evidence of comfortable living standards. Slaves and freed slaves operated successful businesses, and women played more prominent economic roles than traditional sources suggest. The city's diversity reflects the cosmopolitan nature of the Roman Empire at its height. Sexual attitudes in Pompeii were remarkably open by modern standards. Erotic art decorated homes and public buildings without apparent shame or concealment. The city's numerous brothels were clearly marked and elaborately decorated, suggesting that prostitution was a regulated and accepted part of urban life. These discoveries initially shocked Victorian archaeologists, who sometimes reburied or restricted access to materials they considered inappropriate. Recent excavations continue to reveal new insights about Pompeian life. Advanced imaging techniques allow researchers to study the internal structure of buildings without damaging them. Chemical analysis of food remains reveals details about ancient diets and cooking techniques. DNA studies of human remains provide information about population demographics and health conditions. The tragedy of Pompeii created an unintended gift for modern archaeology. Nowhere else can we walk through ancient streets, enter ancient homes, and see ancient possessions exactly as they were left nearly 2,000 years ago. The city serves as a time capsule that allows us to step directly into the Roman world and observe how ordinary people lived, worked, loved and died in one of history's greatest civilizations. Mount Vesuvius still looms over the Bay of Naples, and Pompeii still draws visitors who come to witness this intersection of human ambition and natural power. In the shadow of the volcano that destroyed it, the city continues to reveal secrets about daily life in the ancient world, proving that sometimes history's greatest tragedies create its most valuable lessons. Göbekli Tepe. On a windswept hilltop in southeastern Turkey, where rolling plains stretch toward distant mountains, stands a monument that shouldn't exist. Göbekli Tepe, the belly hill in Turkish, holds stone circles that predate Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first saw the massive T-shaped pillars emerging from the earth in the 1990s, he realized he was looking at something that would rewrite the story of human civilization. These weren't the crude stone arrangements you might expect from people who had barely figured out agriculture. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe stand up to 18 feet tall and weigh as much as 16 tons each. They're carved from solid limestone with tools that shouldn't have existed in 9500 BCE, decorated with reliefs of animals so lifelike they seem ready to prowl off the stone. Foxes, boars, snakes and scorpions march across the pillar surfaces in processions that hint at meanings we can barely guess. The builders of Göbekli Tepe accomplished this feat during the Neolithic Revolution, that crucial period when humans transitioned from hunting and gathering to agriculture and settled life. Conventional wisdom held that people first developed farming, then used their agricultural surplus to support specialized craftsmen who could build monuments. Göbekli Tepe suggests the opposite sequence. Perhaps the desire to build sacred spaces actually drove the development of agriculture and complex society. The site consists of multiple circular enclosures, each containing rings of carved pillars arranged around two massive central stones. The T-shaped design of these pillars may represent stylized human figures, with carved arms and hands sometimes visible on their sides. If so, these stone giants are humanity's oldest known anthropomorphic sculptures, predating the famous Venus figurines by millennia. What makes Göbekli Tepe even more mysterious is that it was deliberately buried. Around 8000 BCE, after over 1,000 years of use, the builders carefully covered their monuments with tons of earth and rubble. This wasn't gradual abandonment or accidental burial by natural processes. Someone made a conscious decision to hide these circles from future generations, creating the artificial hill that gave the site its modern name. The animal carvings provide tantalizing clues about the builders' worldview and environment. Wild boars, aurochs, gazelles and other creatures populate the pillars in arrangements that may represent seasonal cycles, mythological narratives or astronomical observations. Vultures appear frequently, their wings spread as if descending from the sky. In a world without written language, these stone animals may have served as a library of knowledge about the natural world and humanity's place within it. Recent discoveries suggest that Göbekli Tepe was part of a larger cultural phenomenon. Similar sites with T-shaped pillars have been found throughout the region, creating a network of ritual centers that connected communities across hundreds of miles. The builders shared artistic conventions, construction techniques, and possibly religious beliefs that created the world's first known monumental landscape. The logistics of building Göbekli Tepe boggle the mind. Quarrying, transporting, and erecting these massive pillars would have required coordinated effort from hundreds of people over many generations. Yet these were supposedly nomadic hunter-gatherers who lived in small mobile bands. The site implies a level of social organization and planning that archaeologists didn't think existed in the Neolithic period. Evidence from around the site suggests that Göbekli Tepe hosted large gatherings that brought together people from vast distances. Stone tools made from obsidian quarried hundreds of miles away indicate extensive trade networks. Animal bones show evidence of massive feasting events that consumed thousands of gazelles, wild boars and aurochs. These weren't intimate tribal ceremonies, but grand festivals that may have attracted pilgrims from across the ancient Near East. The religious significance of Göbekli Tepe remains largely mysterious, but clues emerge from careful study of the carvings and layout. The circular enclosures may have represented sacred spaces where humans could commune with supernatural forces. The animal reliefs might have depicted totemic spirits, seasonal deities, or mythological beings that govern the natural world. The act of building itself may have been as important as the finished product, creating community bonds through shared labor and ritual activity. Climate change may have played a role in the site's eventual abandonment and burial. The end of the last ice age brought dramatic environmental shifts to the region, transforming lush grasslands into the semi-arid landscape we see today. The megafauna depicted on the pillars largely disappeared, replaced by smaller animals more suited to the changing climate. Perhaps the old rituals no longer seemed relevant in this transformed world. Modern excavations at Göbekli Tepe use cutting-edge technology to unlock the site's secrets. Ground-penetrating radar reveals additional structures still buried beneath the surface. 3D modeling allows archaeologists to study the spatial relationships between different enclosures. Chemical analysis of stone tools and pottery fragments provides insights into daily life and ritual practices. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has forced archaeologists to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human development. It suggests that the capacity for complex symbolic thought and monumental architecture emerged much earlier than previously believed. These Neolithic builders possessed sophisticated understanding of engineering, astronomy, and artistic expression that challenges our ideas about primitive societies. As excavations continue, Göbekli Tepe keeps revealing new surprises that deepen rather than resolve its mysteries. Each season brings fresh discoveries that add pieces to a puzzle whose complete picture remains tantalizingly out of reach. On that hilltop in Turkey, stone giants continue their eternal watch over secrets that may transform our understanding of humanity's earliest civilizations. The Indus Valley. In the fertile valleys of the Indus River, where monsoon rains once brought annual floods that nourished vast agricultural plains, flourished what may have been history's most egalitarian civilization. The Harappan culture, as archaeologists call it, built cities that would make modern urban planners weep with envy. Perfectly straight streets laid out in precise grid patterns, covered drainage systems that channeled wastewater with Swiss efficiency, and standardized brick sizes that suggest quality control measures that wouldn't look out of place in a contemporary building code. Yet, for all their urban sophistication, the Harappans remained stubbornly silent. They developed one of the world's earliest writing systems, leaving behind thousands of inscribed seals, pottery fragments, and copper tablets. But their script refuses to yield its secrets to modern scholars, making the Indus Valley civilization one of archaeology's most eloquent mutes. We can see what they built, but we cannot hear their voices or read their thoughts. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro stretched across hundreds of acres, housing populations that may have reached 40,000 people each. These weren't the organic, meandering settlements that grew gradually over time, but carefully planned urban environments designed by people who understood the principles of sanitation, traffic flow, and residential zoning. Houses were built with private wells and bathrooms connected to sophisticated sewerage systems that carried waste outside the city walls. Perhaps most remarkably, Harappan cities show little evidence of the social stratification that characterized other early civilizations. There are no massive palaces, no monumental temples, no royal tombs filled with golden treasures. The largest structures appear to be public buildings like the Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, a ceremonial pool lined with waterproof bitumen that may have served ritual or administrative functions. Even the houses, while varying in size, don't show the dramatic differences between rich and poor that marked contemporary societies in Mesopotamia or Egypt. The Harappans were master craftsmen who mass-produced goods with an attention to standardization that suggests centralized quality control. Their weights and measures followed consistent standards across the entire civilization, from the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas. Pottery, bronze tools, and jewelry show evidence of specialized workshops that supplied goods to a trade network spanning thousands of miles. Their merchants carried Harappan products throughout the ancient world. Indus Valley seals have been found in Mesopotamian cities, while Mesopotamian goods appear in Harappan archaeological contexts. They traded in precious stones, metals, ivory, and probably textiles, establishing commercial relationships that connected the Indian subcontinent to the broader ancient economy centuries before such connections became common. The agricultural foundation of Harappan civilization was as impressive as their urban planning. They developed sophisticated irrigation systems that managed river water during both flood and drought seasons. Their farmers grew wheat, barley, peas, and sesame, while also cultivating cotton to produce textiles that were prized throughout the ancient world. The civilization supported a population that may have reached 5 million people at its peak, making it larger than contemporary Egypt or Mesopotamia. Around 1900 BCE, this remarkable civilization began to decline. Cities were gradually abandoned, trade networks collapsed, and the sophisticated urban culture that had flourished for over 600 years slowly faded away. The causes of this decline remain as mysterious as the civilization itself. Climate change may have shifted monsoon patterns, reducing the agricultural productivity that supported Harappan cities. The Indus River may have changed course, leaving major cities without reliable water sources. Archaeological evidence suggests the decline was gradual rather than catastrophic. There are no signs of widespread warfare, foreign invasion, or natural disasters that could explain the sudden collapse of such a sophisticated society. Instead, the Harappans seem to have simply walked away from their cities, abandoning the urban lifestyle they had perfected, and returning to smaller rural settlements that left fewer archaeological traces. The Harappan writing system tantalizes scholars with the promise of unlocking the civilization's secrets. The script appears on over 4,000 objects, but individual inscriptions are frustratingly brief, typically containing only a few symbols. Without a bilingual text like the Rosetta Stone, and without knowledge of the underlying language, decipherment remains elusive. Various scholars have claimed breakthroughs, but none have gained widespread acceptance in the academic community. Recent excavations continue to expand our understanding of Harappan culture. New sites reveal the true extent of the civilization, which may have covered an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Advanced analysis techniques provide insights into Harappan diet, health, and lifestyle. Marine archaeology in the Arabian Sea has discovered Harappan ports that reveal the maritime extent of their trading networks. The technology used by Harappan craftsmen was remarkably advanced for its time. They developed techniques for working with bronze, copper, and precious metals that produce goods of exceptional quality. Their pottery shows evidence of kilns that achieve temperatures high enough to produce near-porcelain ceramics. They created intricate jewelry, sophisticated tools, and artistic objects that demonstrate both technical skill and aesthetic sensibility. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Harappan civilization is what it suggests about alternative paths for human social development. While their contemporaries in Egypt and Mesopotamia were building pyramids and ziggurats to glorify kings and gods, the Harappans seem to have focused their energy on creating comfortable, efficient cities for ordinary people. Their legacy raises questions about the relationship between social inequality and civilizational achievement that remain relevant today. The silence of the Harappans may be the most eloquent statement they could have made. In a world where most ancient civilizations left behind monuments to power and conquest, the Indus Valley people built monuments to practical urban living. Their cities stand as testimony to human ingenuity directed toward collective welfare rather than individual glorification, creating a vision of civilization that feels remarkably modern despite its ancient origins. The Sumerians. In the fertile mudflats between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where Iraq's southern deserts now stretch toward the Persian Gulf, humanity first learned to write, brew beer, and argue about taxes. The Sumerians accomplished this civilizational hat-trick around 3500 BCE, making them arguably the world's first urban civilization. They also invented the wheel, which seems like a humble beginning for humanity's favorite excuse to avoid walking. Sumerian cities rose from the Mesopotamian plains like islands of brick and ambition. Ur, Uruk, Lagash, and Babylon grew around massive ziggurats that served as temples, administrative centers, and probably the world's first examples of mixed-use development. These stepped pyramids reached toward the heavens with the kind of confidence that comes from being the only people in your neighborhood who know how to write. The invention of cuneiform writing was perhaps humanity's most important technological breakthrough, though it began with the distinctly unromantic purpose of tracking grain shipments and livestock inventories. Sumerian scribes pressed wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets, creating the world's first permanent records. Thanks to their bureaucratic obsessions, we can read Sumerian tax records, legal contracts, and royal boasts with remarkable clarity across 45 centuries. Sumerian religion was refreshingly practical. Their gods behaved like a dysfunctional extended family with supernatural powers, complete with petty jealousies, romantic entanglements, and administrative responsibilities. Enlil controlled the winds, Inanna governed love and war, and Enki managed fresh water and wisdom. These deities required constant attention through elaborate rituals, temple maintenance, and regular offerings of food and drink. The Epic of Gilgamesh, humanity's oldest known work of literature, emerged from this cultural milieu. The story follows a semi-divine king who befriends a wild man, battles monsters, and ultimately confronts the reality of human mortality. It's a tale so universal that modern readers still recognize its themes of friendship, adventure, and the search for meaning in an uncertain world. Sumerian society was hierarchical but surprisingly mobile. Kings ruled at the top, followed by priests, merchants, and skilled craftsmen, with farmers and slaves forming the base of the social pyramid. However, written contracts and legal codes provided protections that allowed enterprising individuals to improve their circumstances through trade, craft, specialization, or temple service. Agriculture formed the foundation of Sumerian prosperity, but their relationship with the land was complicated. The annual floods of the Tigris and Euphrates brought fertile silt, but also destruction and unpredictability. Sumerians developed sophisticated irrigation systems to manage water flow, creating a network of canals, levees, and reservoirs that transformed marshland into productive farmland. The Sumerians were inveterate traders who established commercial relationships throughout the ancient world. Their merchants traveled as far as the Indus Valley and Anatolia, exchanging Mesopotamian grain and textiles for precious metals, stones, and exotic goods. They developed standardized weights and measures, commercial law, and credit systems that facilitated long-distance trade. Sumerian mathematics and astronomy laid groundwork for scientific traditions that influenced civilization for millennia. They developed a base 60 number system that still governs how we measure time and angles. Their astronomers tracked celestial movements with sufficient accuracy to create calendars and predict eclipses, knowledge that proved both practically useful and religiously significant. Around 2000 BCE, Sumerian political power began to wane as other Mesopotamian peoples adopted and adapted their cultural innovations. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians built empires on Sumerian foundations, preserving Sumerian literature and learning while adding their own contributions to the civilizational mix. The legacy of Sumerian civilization extends far beyond their geographical boundaries. Their innovations in writing, law, government, and urban planning provided templates that influenced cultures throughout the ancient world. The Hebrew Bible contains flood narratives that closely parallel Sumerian myths, while Greek and Roman traditions show clear Mesopotamian influences. Modern archaeology continues to reveal new aspects of Sumerian culture and technology. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of sophisticated metalworking, advanced mathematics, and complex trade networks that connected Mesopotamia to distant civilizations. Satellite imagery has revealed the extent of Sumerian irrigation systems, some of which can still be traced in the modern landscape. Perhaps most remarkably, the Sumerians created the world's first known example of urban civilization practically from scratch. In the span of a few centuries, they transformed scattered farming villages into complex cities with specialized crafts, professional administration, and monumental architecture. Their achievement established patterns of social organization that continue to influence human societies today, proving that sometimes the most revolutionary changes begin with the simple desire to keep better track of who owns which sheep. The Phoenicians. Along the eastern shores of the Mediterranean, where the mountains of Lebanon meet the sea in a narrow coastal strip, lived a people who turned commerce into an art form. The Phoenicians never built a great empire or constructed monumental pyramids, but they accomplished something far more practical. They connected the ancient world through trade networks that stretched from Spain to the Indian Ocean. Their true monument was the Mediterranean itself, transformed into a bustling highway of commerce and cultural exchange. The Phoenician homeland consisted of a string of independent city-states perched on natural harbours along the coast of modern Lebanon and Syria. Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, and Aradus each maintained their own government and trading fleets while sharing a common culture, language, and entrepreneurial spirit. With limited agricultural land squeezed between mountains and sea, they looked outward to the waters for their livelihood. These maritime merchants possessed seafaring skills that allowed them to navigate waters that terrified other ancient peoples, while their contemporaries hugged coastlines and avoided open water. Phoenician captains sailed confidently across the Mediterranean using knowledge of winds, currents, and celestial navigation that they guarded as carefully as state secrets. Their ships were marvels of practical engineering, designed for cargo capacity and seaworthiness rather than speed or military prowess. The Phoenicians established trading posts and colonies throughout the Mediterranean basin, creating the ancient world's most extensive commercial network. Carthage in North Africa became their greatest colonial success, eventually growing into a major power that challenged Rome for Mediterranean supremacy. Spanish colonies provided access to silver mines that funded Phoenician expansion, while settlements in Sicily and Sardinia controlled strategic shipping lanes. Their most revolutionary contribution to human civilization was the alphabet. Earlier writing systems like Egyptian hieroglyphs and Mesopotamian cuneiform required hundreds of symbols to represent words or syllables. The Phoenicians simplified this process by creating a system of 22 letters that represented individual sounds. This innovation made literacy accessible to ordinary merchants and craftsmen rather than restricting it to specialized scribes and priests. The Phoenician alphabet spread throughout the Mediterranean world as traders carried it to their various destinations. Greeks adapted it to their own language, adding vowels to create the system that would eventually evolve into the Latin alphabet used throughout the Western world today. The simple act of buying and selling goods thus became the vehicle for one of history's most important intellectual advances. Phoenician craftsmen were renowned throughout the ancient world for their skill in working with precious materials. They produced intricate jewellery, carved ivory objects and metalwork that was prized by kings and wealthy merchants from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Their artisans synthesized artistic traditions from various cultures, creating distinctive styles that reflected their role as cultural intermediaries. The secret of Tyrian purple made the Phoenicians legendary in the ancient world. This precious dye, extracted from murex shells found along their coast, produced a colour so vivid and lasting that it became associated with royalty and divine power. The process was labour-intensive and closely guarded, requiring thousands of shells to produce small amounts of dye. Phoenician religion centred around deities who reflected their maritime culture and commercial concerns. Melkart was the patron god of Tyre and protector of sailors, while Astarte governed fertility and prosperity. Their religious practices included child sacrifice during times of crisis, a custom that horrified Greeks and Romans but apparently seemed reasonable to people whose survival depended on appeasing unpredictable sea gods. The political organisation of Phoenician cities reflected their commercial priorities. Rather than powerful kings ruling through military might, merchants and shipowners formed councils that made decisions based on trade considerations. This quasi-democratic system worked well for people whose primary concern was maintaining profitable business relationships rather than conquering territory or building monuments to royal glory. Phoenician decline came gradually as other powers adopted their innovations while possessing greater military resources. The rise of Greek naval power challenged Phoenician dominance in the eastern Mediterranean, while Roman expansion eventually absorbed their western territories. The destruction of Carthage in 1406 BCE marked the end of Phoenician political independence, though their cultural influence persisted for centuries. Modern archaeology continues to reveal the extent of Phoenician influence throughout the ancient world. Phoenician artifacts appear in locations as distant as Britain and the Indian Ocean, suggesting trade networks even more extensive than previously imagined. Their legacy lives on in the alphabet. You're reading right now, proof that sometimes the most enduring monuments are not built from stone, but from the simple human desire to communicate across the vast distances that separate one culture from another. The Olmecs. In the steamy lowlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, where jaguars once prowled through dense tropical forests, America's first complex civilization carved massive heads from volcanic stone and laid the foundation for all Mesoamerican cultures that followed. The Olmecs flourished from around 1500 to 400 BCE, creating artistic and architectural traditions that would influence the Maya, Aztec, and countless other peoples for over 2 millennia. Their most famous legacy consists of 17 colossal stone heads scattered across the Mexican landscape like monuments to forgotten giants. These sculptures, some weighing over 20 tons and standing 9 feet tall, display remarkably individualistic facial features that suggest they represent specific rulers or important figures. Each head wears a distinctive helmet-like headdress, leading some scholars to speculate about ancient ball games, warfare, or ceremonial practices that required protective headgear. The logistics of creating these monuments staggers the imagination. The Olmecs quarried basalt from volcanic deposits in the Tuxtla Mountains, then somehow transported these massive blocks over 60 miles through swampland to their ceremonial centres. Without wheels, large domesticated animals, or metal tools, they accomplished this feat using techniques that remain largely mysterious. Perhaps they floated the stones on rafts during seasonal floods, or rolled them on logs through carefully prepared paths. La Venta, the most famous Olmec site, was built on an island in the coastal swamps according to a precise plan that aligned with astronomical observations. The site features a massive earthen pyramid, elaborate stone platforms, and carefully arranged offerings of jade, serpentine, and other precious materials. The complex demonstrates sophisticated understanding of engineering, astronomy, and urban planning that predates similar achievements in other parts of the Americas by centuries. Olmec artists excelled at working with jade, a material they valued more highly than gold. Their craftsmen carved intricate figurines, masks, and ceremonial objects from this hard stone, using techniques that required exceptional skill and patience. Many of these jade objects depict human-jaguar hybrids, suggesting religious beliefs that emphasize transformation and the blending of human and animal characteristics. The bull game, which became central to Mesoamerican culture, appears to have originated with the Olmecs. Archaeological evidence suggests they built the first formal bull courts and established the ritual significance that would make this sport a crucial element of religious and political life throughout ancient Mexico. The game involved keeping a rubber ball in motion using only hips, forearms, and shoulders, often with life or death consequences for the participants. Olmec influence extended far beyond their homeland through trade networks that carried their artistic styles and religious concepts throughout Mesoamerica. Olmec-style artifacts appear in sites from central Mexico to El Salvador, suggesting either extensive trade relationships or direct cultural influence. Their iconography featuring jaguars, serpents, and human-animal transformations became fundamental elements of later Mesoamerican religions. The writing system developed by the Olmecs represents one of the earliest forms of hieroglyphic communication in the Americas. Stone monuments bear carved symbols that may record names, dates, or religious concepts, though the script remains largely undeciphered. These inscriptions suggest a literate elite capable of recording complex information, laying groundwork for the more elaborate writing systems later developed by the Maya. Around 400 BCE, Olmec civilization underwent a mysterious transformation. Their major ceremonial centers were abandoned or destroyed, and the distinctive artistic styles that had defined their culture for over 1,000 years suddenly disappeared. Some monuments show evidence of deliberate defacement, as if later peoples systematically destroyed Olmec religious symbols and political representations. The reasons for this cultural collapse remain debated among scholars. Environmental changes, internal political upheaval, or invasion by outside groups could all have contributed to the end of Olmec dominance. Climate data suggests that the region experienced significant ecological stress during this period, which might have undermined the agricultural foundation of Olmec society. Despite their political disappearance, Olmec cultural innovations continued to influence Mesoamerican civilization for centuries. The Maya adopted Olmec calendar concepts, religious iconography, and architectural principles. Aztec mythology incorporated elements that can be traced back to Olmec religious traditions. Their legacy demonstrates how foundational cultures can shape entire regions even after their political power vanishes, proving that sometimes the most enduring conquests are achieved through ideas rather than armies. Stonehenge Builders. On the windswept Salisbury Plain in southern England, where rolling chalk downs stretch toward distant horizons, stands perhaps the world's most famous prehistoric monument. Stonehenge has inspired wonder, speculation, and more than a few questionable theories about ancient astronauts, but the reality of its builders proves far more fascinating than any science fiction scenario. These Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples created something that continues to baffle engineers and astronomers 4,000 years after its completion. The monument we see today represents the final phase of construction that spanned over 15 centuries. The earliest builders, working around 3100 BCE, created a simple circular earthwork with a ring of 56 pits that archaeologists call Aubrey holes. These Neolithic people were farmers who had recently learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals. Yet they possessed sufficient social organization and astronomical knowledge to begin this monumental project. Around 2500 BCE, later builders transported the famous blue stones from the Preseli Mountains in Wales. A journey of over 150 miles that required extraordinary logistical planning. These smaller stones, each weighing several tons, were somehow moved across rivers, hills, and valleys using techniques that remain hotly debated. Recent experiments suggest combinations of rollers, sledges, and watercraft could have accomplished this feat, though it would have required coordinated effort from multiple communities. The massive sarsen stones that form Stonehenge's iconic trilithons arrived around 2300 BCE. These enormous blocks, weighing up to 50 tons each, were quarried from the Marlborough Downs about 20 miles north of the site. The builders shaped these hard sandstone blocks using only stone hammers and wooden wedges, creating precise joints that held the massive lintels in place without mortar or metal fasteners. The engineering precision of Stonehenge rivals modern construction standards. The sarsen circle maintains perfect horizontal alignment despite being built on sloping ground, requiring the builders to compensate for the natural terrain through careful planning and execution. The mortise and tenon joints that secure the lintels demonstrate sophisticated understanding of carpentry techniques applied to stonework. Archaeological evidence reveals that Stonehenge served as a cemetery for elite individuals over many centuries. Cremated remains found throughout the site suggest it functioned as a sacred burial ground for important families or social groups. The effort required to build and maintain the monument indicates these people possess considerable wealth and social hierarchy, challenging earlier assumptions about egalitarian prehistoric societies. The astronomical alignments of Stonehenge have captured scholarly attention for centuries. The monument's axis points toward the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset, suggesting its builders possessed detailed knowledge of solar cycles. Some researchers argue that Stonehenge functioned as a primitive computer for predicting eclipses and tracking lunar cycles, though such claims remain controversial among archaeologists. The builders of Stonehenge were part of a broader cultural phenomenon that created numerous stone circles throughout Britain and Ireland. Avebury, Ring of Brodgar, and dozens of smaller sites demonstrate that these communities shared common religious beliefs and architectural traditions. This suggests a level of cultural unity across prehistoric Britain that facilitated the exchange of ideas and resources necessary for monumental construction projects. Recent discoveries continue to expand our understanding of the Stonehenge builders and their world. The nearby Durrington Walls site revealed evidence of a massive settlement that may have housed thousands of people during construction seasons. Analysis of pig teeth found at the site indicates that people travelled from as far as Scotland and Wales to participate in feasting ceremonies associated with the monument. Genetic studies of human remains from Stonehenge and surrounding areas provide insights into the population dynamics of prehistoric Britain. The builders appear to have been descendants of Neolithic farmers who had migrated from continental Europe, bringing new technologies and cultural practices that transformed the British landscape. The legacy of Stonehenge extends far beyond its physical presence on Salisbury Plain. The monument represents humanity's earliest known attempt to create architecture that bridged earthly and celestial realms, using massive stones to mark the eternal cycles of sun and moon. Whatever specific purposes it served for its builders, Stonehenge continues to inspire wonder at the achievements possible when human ingenuity, social cooperation, and spiritual vision combine in pursuit of something greater than mere survival. The Nazca. In the arid plateau of southern Peru, where rain falls perhaps once in a decade and the desert preserves footprints for centuries, an ancient people created the world's largest art gallery. The Nazca lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles of pampa, depicting animals, plants, geometric figures, and abstract designs that can only be fully appreciated from the air. These geoglyphs represent one of archaeology's most perplexing achievements, massive artworks created by people who could never see them in their entirety. The Nazca culture flourished between 100 and 700 CE in one of Earth's driest regions, where the Atacama Desert meets the Andes foothills. This harsh environment, which seems hostile to human habitation, actually provided perfect conditions for preserving their remarkable legacy. The combination of minimal rainfall, stable temperatures, and minimal wind creates natural conditions that have protected the lines for over 1,000 years. Creating the Nazca lines required surprisingly simple technology applied with extraordinary precision. The artist removed the dark iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert surface, revealing the lighter-coloured earth beneath. This technique, called negative geoglyph creation, produced lines that contrast sharply with the surrounding terrain. The work required careful planning and execution, as mistakes would be difficult to correct in this unforgiving landscape. The famous animal figures demonstrate remarkable artistic sophistication despite their massive scale. The hummingbird spans 300 feet, the spider reaches 150 feet, and the monkey extends over 350 feet from head to tail. These creatures are rendered with flowing, continuous lines that capture the essence of each animal with minimal but perfectly placed strokes. Creating such figures without aerial perspective required sophisticated understanding of geometry and proportion. Archaeological evidence suggests the Nazca created these lines over several centuries, with different generations adding to and modifying the existing designs. Some lines overlay earlier figures, indicating that the site remained ritually significant long after its initial creation. The sheer number of geoglyphs, estimated at over 800 individual figures, suggests that line creation was an ongoing cultural practice rather than a single monumental project. The purpose of the Nazca lines has generated countless theories ranging from astronomical calendars to religious processional routes to landing strips for ancient aircraft. More prosaic explanations focus on their likely role in water ceremonies and fertility rituals. In a desert environment where survival depended on seasonal water sources, rituals aimed at ensuring rainfall would have held paramount importance for Nazca society. Recent research supports the water ceremony hypothesis through careful analysis of the lines' locations and orientations. Many geoglyphs point toward mountain peaks where seasonal streams originated, while others align with underground water sources. The Nazca may have walked these lines during ceremonial processions designed to honor the water spirits that controlled their survival in the desert. The Nazca also created an extensive system of underground aqueducts called puquios that brought water from mountain aquifers to agricultural areas. These engineering marvels, some still functioning today, demonstrate sophisticated understanding of hydraulic principles and geological formations. The same culture that created mysterious desert art also solved practical problems of desert survival through innovative technology. Nazca pottery reveals a complex society with distinct social classes, specialized crafts, and extensive trade networks. Their ceramics feature polychrome designs depicting mythological figures, animals, and geometric patterns that echo the themes found in the desert lines. Trophy heads appear frequently in Nazca art, suggesting warfare or ritual practices involving head-taking. The decline of Nazca civilization around 700 CEE coincided with severe environmental challenges that may have overwhelmed their desert adaptations. Climate data indicates that the region experienced extended droughts that would have stressed their water management systems beyond their capacity. The same environmental conditions that preserved their lines may have ultimately contributed to their cultural collapse. Modern threats to the Nazca lines include urban development, mining activities, and ironically, tourism designed to appreciate them. The fragile desert surface can be damaged by foot traffic, vehicle tires, or construction equipment, making conservation a constant challenge. UNESCO World Heritage status provides some protection, but these ancient artworks remain vulnerable to both human activity and natural processes. The Nazca lines continue to inspire wonder at human creativity and determination. In one of the world's most challenging environments, ancient artists created works of art that transformed an entire landscape into a canvas for expressing their relationship with the natural and supernatural worlds. The Babylonians. In the heart of Mesopotamia, where the Euphrates River curved through fertile plains, rose a city that would become synonymous with ancient grandeur and divine ambition. Babylon first emerged around 2300 BCE as a modest settlement, but under the rule of kings like Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar, it grew into one of history's most magnificent urban centers. The very name Babylon still evokes images of towering ziggurats, hanging gardens, and the hubris of those who would build a tower to reach heaven. Hammurabi transformed Babylon from a minor city-state into the capital of an empire around 1750 BCE. His greatest achievement wasn't military conquest but legal innovation. The Code of Hammurabi, carved into a massive stone stele, established one of history's first comprehensive legal systems. Its 282 laws covered everything from property rights to family relationships, establishing the principle that justice should be predictable and uniform rather than arbitrary and personal. The code's famous eye for an eye principle sounds harsh to modern ears, but it actually represented a progressive step toward proportional justice. Rather than allowing unlimited revenge or demanding excessive compensation, Hammurabi's laws established that punishment should match the crime, This concept of measured justice influenced legal systems throughout the ancient world and continues to shape our understanding of fair punishment today. Babylonian mathematics and astronomy reached levels of sophistication that wouldn't be surpassed until the Renaissance. Their base 60 number system gave us the 360-degree circle and the 60-minute hour, mathematical concepts we still use today. Babylonian astronomers tracked planetary movements with such precision that they could predict eclipses centuries in advance, knowledge that gave their priests enormous political and religious authority. The Neo-Babylonian period, beginning around 626 BCE, saw the city reach its greatest splendour under kings like Nebuchadnezzar II. The Babylon of this era was a marvel of ancient engineering, featuring massive walls that Greek historians claimed were wide enough for 2 4-horse chariots to pass each other. The famous Ishtar Gate, decorated with glazed brick reliefs of dragons and bulls, served as the ceremonial entrance to a city that housed perhaps 200,000 people. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, may have been the most ambitious landscaping project ever attempted in the ancient Near East. Ancient sources describe terraced gardens rising in steps above the city, irrigated by an intricate system of pumps and channels that brought water from the Euphrates to create an artificial paradise in the Mesopotamian heat. Ironically, no archaeological evidence for these gardens has ever been found, leading some scholars to suggest they were either located elsewhere or existed only in the imagination of Greek writers. Babylonian religion centered around Marduk, the city's patron deity who gradually absorbed the attributes of other Mesopotamian gods to become supreme ruler of the divine realm. The annual New Year festival, lasting 11 days, celebrated Marduk's victory over the forces of chaos and renewed the king's divine mandate to rule. These elaborate ceremonies reinforced Babylon's claim to be the center of the civilized world. The Tower of Babel, famous from biblical tradition, was probably inspired by Babylon's great ziggurat called Etemenanke, meaning house of the foundation of heaven and earth. This massive structure rose nearly 300 feet above the city, serving as both temple and symbol of Babylonian power. The biblical story of divine intervention to halt its construction reflects the awe and perhaps fear that Babylon's achievements inspired in neighbouring peoples. Babylon's final period of greatness ended with the Persian conquest in 539 BCE, when Cyrus the Great captured the city without a battle. The Persians preserved Babylonian culture and learning, but the city gradually declined in importance as new capitals rose to prominence. By the time of Alexander the Great's visit in 323 BCE, Babylon was already becoming a shadow of its former magnificence. The legacy of Babylonian civilization extended far beyond its political boundaries. Their legal concepts influenced Roman law, their astronomical observations laid groundwork for Greek science, and their architectural innovations inspired builders throughout the ancient world. Even today, when we speak of ambitious projects or towering achievements, we often invoke the memory of this ancient city that dared to reach toward heaven, and for a brief moment in history, seemed to touch it. The Hittites. In the rugged highlands of central Anatolia, where snow-capped peaks overlook rolling plateaus, an Indo-European people built an empire that challenged the might of Egypt and controlled the crossroads between Europe and Asia. The Hittites emerged from obscurity around 1600 BCE to become one of the ancient world's great powers, masters of iron technology and diplomatic innovation, who left behind archives full of treaties, laws, and royal correspondence that read like international relations textbooks. The Hittite capital of Hattusa, nestled among the hills of modern Turkey, was protected by massive stone walls that snaked across the landscape for over 4 miles. These fortifications incorporated advanced military engineering, including multiple gates defended by stone lions and warriors, underground tunnels that allowed defenders to launch surprise attacks, and towers positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. The city's location took advantage of natural defences while controlling vital trade routes that connected the Mediterranean with Central Asia. Hittite society was surprisingly cosmopolitan for its time, incorporating diverse ethnic groups and cultural traditions under a flexible imperial system. The empire included Hittites, Hurrians, Luwians, and numerous other peoples who maintained their local customs while accepting Hittite political authority. This multicultural approach to empire building proved more durable than the rigid centralization attempted by some of their contemporaries. The Hittites were among the first people to master iron metallurgy, giving them significant military advantages over enemies who still relied primarily on bronze weapons and tools. This technological edge, combined with their innovative use of horse-drawn chariots in warfare, allowed them to project power across vast distances and defeat larger armies through superior equipment and tactics. Their legal system, preserved in thousands of cuneiform tablets, reveals a society that valued proportional justice and protection for the weak. Hittite laws show remarkable concern for women's rights, slaves' welfare, and fair treatment of foreigners. Punishments emphasize compensation rather than revenge, with most crimes requiring the guilty party to make restitution to their victims rather than suffer physical punishment. Hittite diplomacy pioneered concepts that remain fundamental to international relations today. The peace treaty between Pharaoh Ramesses II and Hittite King Hattusili III, signed around 1259 BCE, is the world's oldest known peace agreement. This document established principles of mutual non-aggression, extradition of fugitives, and defensive alliance that could serve as a template for modern diplomatic negotiations. The Hittite pantheon reflected their empire's diversity, incorporating deities from all the cultures under their rule. Their 1,000 gods included Mesopotamian, Hurrian, Anatolian, and Indo-European divinities who were worshipped in elaborate festivals that reinforced imperial unity while respecting local traditions. The rock sanctuary at Yazilikaya, carved into living rock near Hattusa, depicts this divine assembly in spectacular relief sculptures. Around 1200 BCE, the Hittite Empire collapsed as part of the broader Bronze Age crisis that affected civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean. The exact causes remain debated, but climate change, internal rebellions, and invasions by the mysterious sea peoples all likely contributed to the empire's fall. The capital city of Hattusa was abandoned and burned, ending over 4 centuries of Hittite dominance. Despite their political collapse, Hittite cultural influences persisted in the small Neo-Hittite kingdoms that emerged in southeastern Anatolia and northern Syria. These successor states preserved Hittite artistic traditions, writing systems, and religious practices for several more centuries until they were eventually absorbed by the Assyrian Empire. Modern rediscovery of the Hittites began in the early 20th century when archaeologists excavated Hattusa and found the royal archives. These cuneiform tablets revealed a sophisticated civilization that had been almost entirely forgotten by classical historians. The decipherment of Hittite hieroglyphs and cuneiform texts opened a window into Bronze Age politics, religion, and daily life that continues to reshape our understanding of the ancient world. The Hittites proved that successful empires could be built on flexibility rather than rigidity, incorporating diversity rather than suppressing it. Their legacy demonstrates that sometimes the most enduring achievements come not from imposing a single vision on the world, but from finding ways to unite different peoples and cultures in pursuit of common goals. The Celts. Across the misty hills and dark forests of ancient Europe from Ireland to Turkey, lived a people who never built a unified empire but created one of history's most enduring cultural legacies. The Celts were not a single nation but a constellation of related tribes who shared similar languages, artistic traditions, and religious beliefs that stretched across the continent like an invisible web of kinship and culture. Celtic society was built around warrior aristocracy, skilled craftsmanship, and oral tradition that preserved knowledge through generations of storytelling rather than written records. Their druids served as priests, judges, teachers, and living libraries who memorized vast amounts of lore, history, and religious lore. These learned men and women could recite genealogies stretching back centuries and settle disputes through their encyclopedic knowledge of custom and precedent. The artistic achievements of Celtic craftsmen remain breathtaking even today. Their metalworkers created intricate torques, brooches, and weapons decorated with flowing patterns that seem to capture the movement of wind through grass or water over stones. The famous Book of Kells and other illuminated manuscripts show how Celtic artists transformed Christian imagery through their distinctive aesthetic of interlaced spirals and stylized animals. Celtic warfare was as much theatre as military strategy. Warriors painted themselves with blue woad, charged into battle while shouting war cries, and displayed severed heads as trophies of their prowess. Their weapons were works of art as well as instruments of death, decorated with elaborate patterns that reflected the owner's status and achievements. Roman writers described Celtic battles as chaotic and terrifying spectacles that combined individual heroics with collective ferocity. The Celtic pantheon reflected their close relationship with the natural world. Gods and goddesses ruled over rivers, forests, mountains, and seasonal cycles, requiring constant attention through offerings and ceremonies. Sacred groves served as outdoor temples where druids performed rituals involving sacrifice, divination, and communion with supernatural forces that governed fertility, warfare, and the afterlife. Celtic settlements ranged from hill forts perched on strategic heights to sprawling oppidum that functioned as proto-urban centres. These towns featured sophisticated defences, specialised craft quarters, and evidence of long-distance trade that connected Celtic communities from the Atlantic to the Black Sea. Archaeological evidence reveals a level of economic and social complexity that contradicts Roman stereotypes about barbarian simplicity. The Roman conquest gradually absorbed most Celtic territories, but Celtic culture proved remarkably resilient. In Ireland and Scotland, beyond the reach of Roman legions, Celtic traditions evolved and adapted while maintaining their essential character. Irish monks preserved Celtic learning through the Dark Ages, creating manuscripts that combine Christian theology with pre-Christian mythology and artistic sensibilities. Celtic languages survived in remote corners of the British Isles, where Welsh, Irish Gaelic, and Scottish Gaelic maintained linguistic connections to the ancient past. These languages preserve poetry, stories, and cultural concepts that provide windows into pre-Christian European worldviews that would otherwise be lost to history. The Celtic revival of the 18th and 19th centuries transformed ancient Celtic culture into a symbol of romantic nationalism and resistance to cultural homogenization. This movement, while often historically inaccurate, helped preserve Celtic languages and traditions that might otherwise have disappeared under pressure from dominant national cultures. Modern archaeology continues to reveal the sophistication and extent of ancient Celtic civilization. Recent discoveries include elaborate burials with imported goods, evidence of advanced metallurgy, and ritual sites that demonstrate the complexity of Celtic religious practices. These findings confirm that the Celts created one of Europe's most influential cultures, one whose legacy continues to shape art, literature, and identity across the modern Celtic nations and beyond. The Sea Peoples. Around 1200 BCE, when the Bronze Age world seemed stable and prosperous, mysterious raiders emerged from the Mediterranean waves to shatter the existing order like a stone through glass. Egyptian records speak of confederation of peoples who attacked from the sea, bringing destruction to coastal cities and toppling civilizations that had flourished for centuries. The Sea Peoples remain one of archaeology's greatest mysteries, a nameless force that helped trigger the collapse of the late Bronze Age world. Egyptian inscriptions from the reigns of Merneptah and Rameses III provide our clearest glimpses of these enigmatic invaders. The texts describe coordinated attacks by groups with names like the Peliset, Chaker, Shekelesh, and Denyen, peoples who apparently moved in large migrations that included women, children, and possessions loaded onto ox carts. This wasn't simple raiding, but population movement on a massive scale, suggesting desperation rather than mere opportunism. The Sea People's impact stretched from Greece to the Levant, leaving archaeological evidence of destruction and abandonment at dozens of major sites. The Mycenaean palaces of Greece were burned and abandoned. Hattusa, the Hittite capital, was sacked and left empty, and cities throughout the eastern Mediterranean show layers of ash and debris from this turbulent period. Within a few generations, the complex international system that had connected Bronze Age civilizations simply ceased to function. Military tactics employed by the Sea Peoples appear to have combined naval assault with coordinated land attacks. Egyptian reliefs show their distinctive feathered headdresses, round shields, and long swords that differed markedly from traditional Bronze Age weaponry. Their ships, depicted with bird-head prows and square sails, could transport large numbers of warriors for surprise attacks on coastal settlements. The identity and origins of the Sea Peoples remain hotly debated among scholars. Some theories connect them to displaced populations from the Aegean, refugees from the collapse of Mycenaean civilization who turned to piracy and migration as their own world disintegrated. Others suggest they came from Western Anatolia, or even the central Mediterranean, driven by climate change, political upheaval, or population pressure. Archaeological evidence supports the idea that the Sea Peoples weren't entirely destructive. In some regions, they appear to have settled and established new communities that blended their own traditions with local customs. The Philistines, who gave their name to Palestine, were probably Sea Peoples who established cities along the Levantine coast after their failed invasion of Egypt. The Bronze Age collapse associated with the Sea Peoples' activities created a dark age that lasted several centuries. International trade networks disappeared, urban centres were abandoned, and literacy declined in many regions. However, this destruction also cleared space for new civilizations to emerge, including the rise of the Iron Age kingdoms that would shape the classical world. Climate data from the period reveals evidence of severe drought and cooling temperatures that may have triggered the population movements and social instability that gave rise to the Sea Peoples phenomenon. Environmental stress combined with political fragmentation created conditions ripe for mass migration and cultural upheaval. Modern scholars increasingly view the Sea Peoples not as external invaders but as symptoms of systemic collapse within Bronze Age civilization itself. They may represent the final act in a drama of climate change, political fragmentation, and economic disruption that brought down one of history's first international systems, proving that even the most sophisticated civilizations remain vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The Scythians. Across the vast grasslands of the Pontic steppes, where endless horizons meet beneath dome of sky, rode a people who turned nomadism into an art form, and made the settled world tremble at the thunder of their horses' hooves. The Scythians dominated the lands north of the Black Sea from roughly 700 to 300 BCE, creating a mobile empire that stretched from the Danube to the Don, and left behind golden treasures that still dazzle museum visitors today. These horse-riding warriors lived their entire lives in the saddle, following seasonal patterns that took their herds across hundreds of miles of grassland. Greek historians marveled at their ability to appear suddenly from nowhere, strike with devastating effect, and vanish back into the steppes before their enemies could organize effective pursuit. They perfected the art of mounted archery, firing backwards while retreating in the technique that became known as the Parthian shot. Scythian society was organized around mobility and warfare, with wealth measured in horses, cattle, and portable gold objects rather than land or permanent structures. Their kings ruled from elaborate felt tents that could be assembled or dismantled in hours, leading armies that could cover vast distances while living entirely off their herds and the tribute extracted from agricultural peoples along their borders. The artistic legacy of the Scythians reveals a sophisticated culture with distinctive aesthetic traditions. Their craftsmen created intricate gold objects decorated with stylized animals in dynamic poses, eagles seizing fish, stags with elaborate antlers, and predators locked in eternal combat. This animal style influenced artistic traditions from China to Western Europe, spreading through trade and conquest across the ancient world. Scythian burial practices created some of archaeology's most spectacular discoveries. Royal tombs called kurgans contained elaborate grave goods including weapons, jewelry, textiles, and sacrificed horses that were meant to serve the deceased in the afterlife. The famous Scythian gold treasures found in these tombs demonstrate wealth that rivaled contemporary Greek city-states or Persian provinces. Greek historians like Herodotus left detailed accounts of Scythian customs that seem exotic, even by ancient standards. They described warriors who drank the blood of their first enemies, used enemy skulls as drinking cups, and practiced ritualistic cannabis smoking in enclosed tents. Archaeological evidence, including bronze cauldrons with hemp residue, confirms at least some of these ethnographic observations. The Scythians gradually disappeared from history as new waves of nomadic peoples moved westward from Central Asia. The Sarmatians, followed by other steppe peoples, displaced or absorbed the Scythian tribes, continuing the cycle of nomadic dominance that characterized Eurasian politics for over a millennium. Modern DNA analysis of Scythian remains reveals a diverse population that included both European and Asian ancestries, reflecting the cosmopolitan nature of steppe societies that absorbed peoples and cultural influences from across the ancient world. Their legacy endures in the genetic heritage of Eastern European populations and in the romantic image of the noble horseman that continues to capture imaginations today. Ancient Nubia, along the cataracts of the Nile, where granite boulders force the great river through narrow channels and cascades of white water, flourished a civilization that ruled Egypt when pharaohs were but distant memories. The Nubians, dwelling in the lands south of Aswan in what is now Sudan, created kingdoms that endured for over 1,000 years, built more pyramids than their northern neighbours, and preserved ancient Egyptian traditions long after Egypt itself had forgotten them. The kingdom of Kush emerged around 1070 BCE in the shadow of Egyptian decline, inheriting the cultural legacy of their former overlords while adding distinctly African innovations. Nubian kings adopted Egyptian royal titulature, worshipped Egyptian gods and built pyramid tombs, but they also maintained their own languages, artistic styles and religious practices that reflected their position at the crossroads between Africa and the Mediterranean world. Around 750 BCE, Nubian armies marched north to conquer Egypt itself, establishing the 25th dynasty that ruled both kingdoms from the capital at Napata. These black pharaohs presented themselves as restorers of ancient traditions, rebuilding temples, reviving old religious ceremonies, and commissioning art that deliberately evoked Egypt's classical past. For nearly a century, dark-skinned African rulers governed the land of the pyramids. The Nubian capital cities of Napata and later Meru became centers of learning and craftsmanship that rivaled anything in the ancient world. Meroitic temples combined Egyptian architectural elements with distinctly Nubian decorative schemes, while local artists developed their own hieroglyphic script that remains only partially deciphered. The ruins of these cities still rise from the Sudanese desert like monuments to forgotten grandeur. Nubian metalworkers mastered iron technology that gave their kingdom significant advantages in both warfare and agriculture. The furnaces of Meroe produced weapons and tools that were traded throughout northeast Africa, while Nubian goldsmiths created jewellery of extraordinary beauty that adorned royal courts from Khartoum to Constantinople. Archaeological evidence suggests that Nubian metallurgy influenced technological development throughout sub-Saharan Africa. The queens of Nubia, known as Kandakis, or Candaces, wielded power that would have been remarkable in any ancient society. These royal women ruled in their own right, led armies into battle, and commissioned monumental architecture that celebrated their achievements. Roman historians wrote with grudging respect about Queen Amanirenas, who successfully resisted Augustus Caesar's attempts to extend Roman control up the Nile. Nubian civilization gradually declined as trade routes shifted and new powers emerged in northeast Africa. The capital moved south from Meroe to Soba. As Arab expansion changed the political landscape of the region, Christianity spread through Nubia in the 6th century CE, creating medieval kingdoms that preserved elements of ancient Nubian culture until the Islamic conquest in the 14th century. Modern archaeology continues to reveal the sophistication and extent of ancient Nubian achievements. Underwater excavations in Lake Nessa have recovered artifacts from sites flooded by the Aswan High Dam, while new discoveries at Meroe and other sites demonstrate the complexity of Nubian society and its connections to both Egypt and sub-Saharan Africa. These findings confirm that Nubia was far more than Egypt's junior partner, but a major civilization that shaped the ancient world in its own right. The Picts. In the misty highlands and windswept islands of northern Scotland, where ancient stones stand sentinel over purple heather and grey lochs, lived a people who defied Roman legions, carved mysterious symbols into living rock, and vanished from history almost as mysteriously as they had appeared. The Picts, whose very name means painted people in Latin, controlled Scotland north of the Forth for over 6 centuries, creating a civilization that blended Celtic tradition with unique innovations that continue to puzzle archaeologists today. Roman writers describe the Picts as fierce warriors who painted or tattooed elaborate designs on their bodies before battle, transforming themselves into living works of art that must have been terrifying to encounter in the Highland mists. These same authors grudgingly admitted that Pictish resistance prevented Roman conquest of northern Britain, making the Picts one of the few European peoples to successfully resist imperial expansion at its height. The Pictish symbol stones scattered across the Scottish landscape represent one of Europe's most enigmatic art forms. Over 200 carved stones display a consistent vocabulary of symbols including crescents, V-rods, serpents, mirrors and combs, arranged in combinations that clearly carried meaning but remain largely undeciphered. These symbols appear alongside realistic depictions of animals, warriors and everyday objects, creating a visual language that may have recorded genealogies, territorial boundaries or religious beliefs. Pictish society appears to have been matrilineal, with royal succession passing through the female line rather than from father to son. This unusual practice, rare among European peoples, may explain why Pictish king lists often show rulers with different surnames succeeding each other. Archaeological evidence suggests that Pictish women held positions of power and prestige that would have been exceptional in contemporary societies. The Picts were skilled metalworkers and artists who created sophisticated jewellery, weapons, and religious objects that demonstrate both technical mastery and distinctive aesthetic sensibilities. The famous Pictish silver chains, some weighing several pounds and featuring intricate linked construction, required metalworking skills that rivaled anything produced in contemporary Europe. The sculptors carved elaborate cross slabs that combined Christian imagery with traditional Pictish symbols, creating a unique fusion of old and new religious traditions. Pictish settlements ranged from hill forts perched on strategic heights to coastal villages that took advantage of Scotland's rich marine resources. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of sophisticated agricultural practices, specialised crafts, and trade connections that linked Pictish communities to the broader medieval world. Imported goods from as far away as the Mediterranean demonstrate that the Picts were not isolated barbarians, but active participants in early medieval commerce. The gradual disappearance of Pictish culture during the 9th and 10th centuries remains one of Scotland's great historical mysteries. The union of Pictish and Scottish kingdoms under Kenneth MacAlpin in 8043 CE began a process of cultural assimilation that saw Pictish language, customs and political identity gradually absorbed into emerging Scottish culture. Within a few generations, the people who had successfully resisted Roman conquest had seemingly vanished without a trace. Modern genetic studies of Scottish populations reveal that Pictish ancestry remains strong in northern Scotland, suggesting that the Picts didn't disappear but were culturally absorbed rather than physically replaced. Their symbol stones continue to dot the Scottish landscape as monuments to a people who created something unique in the Celtic world before fading into the highland mists that had long protected their independence. The Thracians, in the rugged mountains and river valleys of the Balkans, where the Danube flows toward the Black Sea through landscapes of forest and meadow, lived a people who gave the world its most famous gladiator and inspired some of its greatest poetry. The Thracians occupied the lands between the Greek city-states and the barbarian tribes of the north, creating a culture that blended sophisticated artistic traditions with fierce warrior customs that made them both feared and admired throughout the ancient world. Greek writers described Thracians as master horsemen and formidable warriors who fought with distinctive curved swords and crescent-shaped shields. Their cavalry tactics influenced military development throughout the region, while their reputation for bravery made Thracian mercenaries highly sought after by Greek city-states and later by Roman armies. The most famous Thracian warrior, Spartacus, led the largest slave rebellion in Roman history, proving that Thracian fighting spirit could challenge even imperial might. Thracian religion centered around Dionysus, the god of wine, ecstasy and divine madness, whose cult may have originated in Thracian lands before spreading throughout the Mediterranean world. Thracian religious practices involved elaborate ceremonies that combined music, dancing and ritual consumption of wine or other substances that induced altered states of consciousness. These ceremonies deeply influenced Greek mystery religions and philosophical traditions. The legendary musician Orpheus was said to be Thracian, and his mythical ability to charm wild beasts and move stones with his music reflects the important role that music and poetry played in Thracian culture. Archaeological evidence confirms that Thracians were skilled metal workers who created elaborate musical instruments suggesting that the Greek association of Thrace with musical excellence had some basis in reality. Thracian kings accumulated enormous wealth through control of gold and silver mines in their mountain territories. The tomb of the Thracian king Scythians III, discovered in 2004, contained a solid gold burial mask and other treasures that demonstrate the sophisticated craftsmanship and enormous resources available to Thracian elites. These royal burials rival anything found in contemporary Greek or Persian context. The Thracians developed distinctive artistic traditions that combined Greek influences with local innovations and motifs borrowed from the wider Eurasian steppe. Their metal workers created intricate gold and silver vessels, decorated with animal designs that show connections to Scythian art, while their sculptors produced works that influenced the development of Hellenistic artistic styles. Thracian society gradually came under Roman control during the 1st century BCE, but Thracian cultural traditions persisted for centuries under imperial rule. The province of Thrace provided recruits for Roman armies, while Thracian religious practices continued to influence the development of Christianity and other religious movements throughout the empire. Modern Bulgaria, Romania, and northern Greece occupy much of the ancient Thracian homeland, and archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of this remarkable culture. Recent excavations have uncovered elaborate tomb complexes, sophisticated urban centers, and evidence of extensive trade networks that connected Thracian communities to the broader ancient world. These findings confirm that the Thracians created a unique civilization that successfully bridged the gap between the classical Mediterranean world and the barbarian cultures of northern Europe. Cahokia, near the confluence of the Mississippi and Illinois rivers, where rich bottomland spreads across the American heartland, rose the largest city north of Mexico before the arrival of Europeans. Cahokia flourished between 150 and 100 CE, supporting a population that may have reached 20,000 people while serving as the ceremonial and political center for a vast network of settlements that stretched across the Midwest. This remarkable urban center emerged from the prairie with no apparent precedent, challenging assumptions about Native American societies and the possibilities of New World civilization. The centerpiece of Cahokia was Monk's Mound, a massive earthen pyramid that still dominates the Illinois landscape today. This artificial mountain, built entirely by human labor using stone tools and woven baskets, covers 14 acres at its base and rises over 100 feet above the surrounding floodplain. The effort required to construct this monument would have occupied thousands of workers for decades, representing a mobilization of human resources that rivals anything accomplished by contemporary European societies. Cahokian society was organized around sophisticated understanding of astronomy, agriculture, and urban planning. The city's layout followed precise astronomical alignments, with ceremonial plazas and mound complexes positioned to track solar and lunar cycles that governed agricultural and religious calendars. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of a woodhenge, a circle of cedar posts that functioned as an astronomical observatory for predicting solstices and equinoxes. The inhabitants of Cahokia were Mosta farmers who developed intensive agricultural techniques that supported dense urban populations without depleting soil fertility. They cultivated corn, beans, squash, and native plants like goosefoot and sunflower, creating a diverse agricultural system that provided nutritional security for their growing city. Sophisticated storage facilities and distribution networks ensured that food surpluses could support specialized craftsmen, priests, and administrators. Archaeological evidence reveals a complex society with distinct social hierarchies and specialized occupations. Elite residences clustered around ceremonial centers featured expensive imported goods like copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf Coast, and chert from distant quarries. Craft workshops produced pottery, tools, and ceremonial objects that were traded throughout the Mississippi River system and beyond. The mysterious decline and abandonment of Cahokia around 1400 CE remains one of North American archaeology's greatest puzzles. Climate data suggests that prolonged droughts may have stressed agricultural systems beyond their capacity, while political instability and resource depletion could have contributed to urban collapse. By the time European explorers reached the region, Cahokia had been abandoned for centuries, leaving only grass-covered mounds as evidence of its former greatness. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal the sophistication and extent of Cahokian influence. Ground-penetrating radar has identified previously unknown structures and defensive works, while analysis of artifacts demonstrates trade connections that reached from the Atlantic to the Rocky Mountains. These findings confirm that Cahokia represented a level of social complexity and urban development that matched anything achieved in the medieval world, proving that monumental civilization could emerge anywhere humans chose to invest their collective energy in pursuit of something greater than individual survival. Great Zimbabwe. On a granite hilltop in southern Africa, where ancient rocks rise from rolling savanna dotted with baobab trees, stands the largest ancient structure south of the Sahara Desert. Great Zimbabwe, built between the 11th and 15th centuries, served as the capital of a powerful kingdom that controlled trade routes linking the African interior with Indian Ocean ports. The massive stone walls that give the site its name, Zimbabwe means stone houses in the local Shona language, were constructed without mortar yet have stood for nearly 1,000 years, testament to the engineering skills of their builders. The Great Enclosure, the most impressive structure at the site, consists of an outer wall that curves gracefully around an area larger than a football field. This wall, built from precisely fitted granite blocks, rises over 30 feet high and stretches for nearly 900 feet in circumference. Inside the enclosure stands the mysterious conical tower, a solid stone structure whose purpose remains unknown, but whose elegant proportions suggest sophisticated understanding of architectural aesthetics and symbolic meaning. Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a trading empire that connected the gold fields of the Zimbabwe Plateau with merchants from the Swahili coast and beyond. Archaeological excavations have uncovered Chinese porcelain, Persian glass beads, and Indian Ocean cowrie shells alongside locally produced gold jewellery and iron tools. These exotic imports demonstrate that African kingdoms participated actively in medieval global trade networks, challenging colonial-era assumptions about African isolation and technological limitations. The kingdom's wealth derived primarily from gold mining and cattle raising, two economic activities perfectly suited to the granite cultures and grasslands of the region. Local miners extracted gold from quartz veins using sophisticated techniques that left minimal environmental impact, while herders managed vast cattle herds that provided both sustenance and symbols of wealth and status. The combination of mineral wealth and pastoral abundance supported a complex society with specialized crafts and elaborate royal courts. Archaeological evidence reveals a highly stratified society with distinct residential areas reflecting social hierarchy. The hill complex, built on natural granite outcrops, housed the royal family and religious elite in stone-walled enclosures that took advantage of natural defensive positions. The valley ruins accommodated commoners and craftsmen in less elaborate structures, while the great enclosure likely served ceremonial and administrative functions that reinforced royal authority. The builders of Great Zimbabwe were ancestors of the modern Shona people, who maintain oral traditions about the site's history and significance. These traditions describe a kingdom ruled by powerful chiefs who controlled rain-making ceremonies, managed trade relationships, and mediated between the living and ancestral spirits. Archaeological evidence supports many aspects of these oral histories, demonstrating the accuracy of traditional knowledge systems. The decline of Great Zimbabwe around 1450 CE coincided with political fragmentation and the rise of competing kingdoms in the region. Climate change may have reduced rainfall and stressed agricultural systems, while the growth of coastal trading centres drew commercial activity away from interior routes. The capital was gradually abandoned as political power shifted to new centres like Kami and Mutapa. European colonizers initially refused to believe that Africans could have built Great Zimbabwe, attributing the site to ancient Phoenicians or other non-African peoples. This racist denial of African achievement delayed serious archaeological investigation for decades and reflected broader colonial assumptions about African capabilities. Modern scholarship has definitively established Great Zimbabwe as an indigenous African achievement that demonstrates the sophistication of medieval African societies. Recent archaeological work continues to reveal new aspects of life at Great Zimbabwe, and its connections to the broader medieval world. Analysis of trade goods provides insights into Indian Ocean commerce, while study of agricultural terraces and water management systems reveals sophisticated environmental adaptation. These discoveries confirm that Great Zimbabwe represents one of Africa's greatest architectural and political achievements, a stone testament to the creativity and ambition of its builders, the Anasazi. In the red rock canyons and wind-swept mazes of the American Southwest, where sandstone cliffs glow like fire in the setting sun, an ancient people built cities that seem to grow from the living rock itself. The Anasazi, whose name means ancient enemies in Navajo, created one of North America's most remarkable civilizations between 100 and 1300 CE, constructing elaborate cliff dwellings and ceremonial centers that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of architecture, astronomy, and desert survival. The most famous Anasazi settlement, Mesa Verde's Cliff Palace, clings to a natural alcove in the canyon wall, like a stone bird's nest built by giants. This remarkable structure contains over 150 rooms and 23 ceremonial chambers called kivas, housing a community that thrived 700 feet above the canyon floor. The builders carefully planned every detail, creating buildings that took advantage of natural shelter while maximizing defensive positions and solar heating during winter months. Anasazi architecture evolved from simple pit houses to complex multi-story pueblos that housed hundreds of people in interconnected apartment-like structures. These buildings were constructed using sophisticated masonry techniques that required no mortar, with stones fitted so precisely that a knife blade cannot slip between them. The walls were often covered with smooth plaster and decorated with geometric designs that reflected both aesthetic sensibilities and possibly religious symbolism. The great houses of Chaco Canyon represent the pinnacle of Anasazi architectural achievement. Pueblo Bonito, the largest of these structures, contained over 600 rooms and rose 4 stories above the desert floor. These massive buildings were connected by an elaborate network of roads that stretched across hundreds of miles of desert, suggesting a level of political organization and social coordination that challenges assumptions about hunter-gatherer societies. Anasazi farmers developed ingenious techniques for agriculture in one of North America's most challenging environments. They built elaborate irrigation systems that captured and channeled seasonal rainfall, created terraced gardens that prevented soil erosion, and developed drought-resistant varieties of corn, beans, and squash that could survive in desert conditions. These agricultural innovations supported population densities that wouldn't be seen again in the region until modern time. The ceremonial life of the Anasazi centered around circular underground chambers called kivas that served as spiritual and social gathering places. These carefully constructed rooms featured precise astronomical alignments, sophisticated ventilation systems, and symbolic elements that connected earthly ceremonies with cosmic cycles. The largest kivas could accommodate hundreds of people for communal rituals that reinforced social bonds and religious beliefs. Anasazi artisans created distinctive pottery, textiles, and jewelry that demonstrate both technical skill and artistic sophistication. Their black-on-white ceramics featured intricate geometric patterns that may have carried symbolic meanings related to water, fertility, or clan identity. Turquoise jewelry and ornaments, found throughout Anasazi sites, indicate extensive trade networks that connected southwestern communities with distant sources of precious materials. Around 1300 CE, the Anasazi began abandoning their cliff dwellings and great houses in what archaeologists call the Great Departure. This massive population movement saw entire regions emptied as people migrated south and east to establish new communities along the Rio Grande and in other areas with more reliable water sources. The causes of this migration remain debated, but prolonged drought, resource depletion, and social conflict all likely contributed to the decision to abandon centuries-old settlements. The descendants of the Anasazi, known today as Pueblo peoples, maintain cultural traditions that preserve many elements of ancient Anasazi life. Hopi, Zuni, and Rio Grande Pueblo communities continue to practice agriculture, pottery making, and ceremonial traditions that connect them directly to their cliff-dwelling ancestors. These living traditions provide insights into Anasazi culture that complement archaeological evidence. Modern research techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Anasazi society and achievements. Tree ring dating provides precise chronologies for construction and abandonment events, while analysis of ancient DNA and isotopes offers insights into diet, health, and population movements. These studies confirm that the Anasazi created a remarkably successful adaptation to desert life that sustained complex societies for over 1,000 years in one of the world's most challenging environments. Çatalhöyük, on the fertile Konya Plain in central Turkey, where the snow-capped Taurus Mountains rise beyond wheat fields and grazing lands, archaeologists have uncovered humanity's first experiment in urban living. Çatalhöyük, dating to around 700–500 BCE, was a Neolithic settlement that housed up to 8,000 people in a honeycomb of mud brick houses built so closely together that residents entered through openings in their roofs rather than doors at ground level. This remarkable site challenges our assumptions about early agriculture, social organization, and the transition from nomadic to settled life. The layout of Çatalhöyük was unlike any other ancient settlement. Houses were built wall to wall without intervening streets or alleys, creating a continuous urban fabric that stretched across 32 acres. Residents moved across the settlement by walking on flat rooftops, descending through roof hatches into their homes via wooden ladders. This unusual arrangement may have provided defense against wild animals or human enemies, while also creating a unique social environment where privacy and community existed in careful balance. Inside these tightly packed houses, families lived in spaces that combined practical necessity with surprising artistic sophistication. The interiors featured raised platforms for sleeping and sitting, built-in storage bins for grain and other goods, and hearths positioned beneath the roof openings to carry smoke away efficiently. But what makes Çatalhöyük truly remarkable is the art that decorated these domestic spaces. Elaborate wall paintings depicting hunting scenes, geometric patterns, and mysterious figures that may represent deities or ancestral spirits. The famous bullheads and horned installations found throughout Çatalhöyük suggest that cattle held special significance in the religious and social life of the community. These installations, created by mounting actual bull skulls and horns in plaster-covered walls, transformed ordinary living spaces into shrines that connected daily life with spiritual beliefs. The prominence of bull imagery may reflect the importance of cattle in the community's economy and identity. Archaeological evidence reveals a society that was remarkably egalitarian for its time and complexity. Houses show little variation in size or luxury, suggesting that wealth differences were minimal despite the settlement's obvious prosperity. Burials found beneath house floors contain similar grave goods regardless of age or gender, indicating social relationships based more on kinship and community membership than on individual status or accumulated wealth. The inhabitants of Çatalhöyük were among the world's first farmers, cultivating wheat, barley, and legumes while also herding sheep, goats, and cattle. This agricultural foundation supported population densities that were unprecedented in human history, allowing large numbers of people to live permanently in one location. The surplus food production also enabled craft specialization, with residents creating sophisticated pottery, textiles, and tools that demonstrate both technical skill and artistic sensibility. The artwork at Çatalhöyük provides extraordinary insights into Neolithic symbolic thought and religious beliefs. Wall paintings depict scenes of human figures surrounding enormous aurochs, birds of prey with human characteristics, and geometric patterns that may represent textiles, baskets, or other material culture. These images suggest a worldview that emphasized relationships between humans, animals, and supernatural forces that governed fertility and survival. The settlement's inhabitants practiced a unique form of mortuary ritual that involved burying their dead beneath the floors of their houses, literally living above their ancestors. This practice created a powerful connection between the living and the dead, that may have reinforced social cohesion and cultural continuity across generations. The proximity of burials to daily life suggests beliefs about death and ancestry that were fundamentally different from later urban cultures. Çatalhöyük was gradually abandoned around 6000 BCE as residents moved to new settlements in the surrounding region. The reasons for this abandonment remain unclear, but environmental changes, resource depletion, or simply the natural life cycle of early urban experiments may have contributed to the decision to start fresh elsewhere. The site was covered by wind-blown soil and remained hidden until modern archaeological excavations revealed its remarkable secrets. Recent research at Çatalhöyük continues to revolutionize our understanding of early urban life. And the Neolithic Revolution, advanced techniques including microscopic analysis of building materials, chemical analysis of food residues, and digital reconstruction of architectural spaces provide unprecedented insights into daily life in humanity's first city, proving that even our earliest urban ancestors possess sophisticated understanding of community organization, artistic expression, and spiritual meaning. The Etruscans. In the rolling hills of central Italy, where cypress trees line ancient roads and vineyards cascade down volcanic slopes, flourished a civilization that taught Rome everything it knew about urban living, religious ceremony, and the finer pleasures of life. The Etruscans dominated the Italian peninsula from roughly 800 to 100 BCE, creating sophisticated city-states that pioneered architectural innovations, artistic techniques, and cultural practices that would become hallmarks of Roman civilization. Yet despite their profound influence on the classical world, the Etruscans remain tantalizingly mysterious, their language only partially understood, and their origins still debated. Etruscan cities like Tarquinia, Cerveteri, and Veii were marvels of urban planning that featured paved streets, elaborate sewage systems, and impressive fortifications built from massive stone blocks fitted together without mortar. These engineering achievements predated similar Roman constructions by centuries, suggesting that Roman claims to architectural superiority were somewhat overstated. The famous Cloaca Maxima, Rome's great sewer system, was actually an Etruscan innovation that Roman engineers later expanded and took credit for perfecting. The artistic legacy of the Etruscans reveals a people who embraced life with infectious enthusiasm. Their tomb paintings depict banqueting scenes where men and women recline together on couches, raising wine cups in eternal celebration while musicians play and dancers whirl through colourful frescoes. These images suggest a society that valued pleasure, equality between the sexes, and the importance of enjoying life's good things while they lasted. Etruscan women enjoyed freedoms that scandalized Greek and Roman observers. They attended public events, participated in banquets alongside men, and apparently controlled significant wealth and property. Tomb inscriptions frequently mention women's names and achievements, while artistic depictions show them as active participants in social and religious ceremonies rather than passive domestic figures, confined to household duties. The religious practices of the Etruscans were complex and influential, forming the foundation for many Roman religious traditions. Etruscan priests, called haruspices, specialized in divination through examination of animal entrails, particularly the livers of sacrificed sheep. These religious specialists developed elaborate systems for interpreting divine will that Roman leaders eagerly adopted, recognizing the political advantages of being able to claim supernatural guidance for important decisions. Etruscan craftsmanship achieved levels of sophistication that rivaled anything produced in the ancient world. Their metalworkers created intricate bronze sculptures, elaborate jewelry, and everyday objects of extraordinary beauty and technical precision. The famous Etruscan mirrors, decorated with mythological scenes in delicate engraving, demonstrate artistic skills that influenced Roman decorative arts for centuries. The gradual absorption of Etruscan cities into the Roman sphere occurred through a combination of conquest, alliance, and cultural assimilation that stretched over several centuries. Rather than sudden military defeat, Etruscan independence eroded as Roman power grew and local elites found it advantageous to adopt Roman citizenship and customs. This process preserved many Etruscan cultural elements while transforming them into components of emerging Roman identity. The Etruscan language, written in an alphabet derived from Greek but representing a tongue unrelated to any known linguistic family, remains only partially deciphered despite thousands of surviving inscriptions. Most Etruscan texts are brief funeral inscriptions or religious dedications, providing frustratingly little insight into their literature, philosophy, or detailed historical records. This linguistic barrier keeps Etruscan civilization perpetually mysterious despite extensive archaeological evidence. Modern archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Etruscan achievement and influence. Recent excavations have uncovered elaborate tombs with perfectly preserved frescoes, sophisticated drainage systems that demonstrate advanced engineering knowledge, and evidence of extensive trade networks that connected Etruscan cities with cultures throughout the Mediterranean world. The legacy of the Etruscans extends far beyond their direct contributions to Roman culture. Their emphasis on urban planning, artistic achievement, and religious innovation established patterns that influenced the development of European civilization for millennia. In the Italian landscape they once dominated, Etruscan influence remains visible in everything from architectural techniques to agricultural practices, a testament to a people who understood that civilization's greatest achievements come from the patient accumulation of knowledge, skill, and cultural refinement across generations. Carril. In the dry valleys of coastal Peru, where the Supe River cuts through desert terrain beneath the shadow of the Andes, archaeologists have uncovered the oldest city in the Americas. Carril flourished around 2600 BCE, making it contemporary with the early Egyptian pyramids and older than Stonehenge. Yet this remarkable civilization remained hidden beneath wind-blown sand until the 9th. The discovery of Carril revolutionized our understanding of New World development, proving that complex urban societies emerged in South America at the same time as the great civilizations of the Old World. The city of Carril covered over 150 acres and housed an estimated 3,000 people in an urban center that featured monumental architecture, residential districts, and ceremonial plazas arranged according to sophisticated planning principles. 6 large pyramid complexes dominated the cityscape, their stepped profiles rising from the desert floor like ancient skyscrapers built from stone and adobe. The largest of these structures, the Pyramid Emea, covers an area larger than 4 football fields and rises nearly 100 feet above the surrounding landscape. What makes Carril truly remarkable is not just its age, but its peaceful nature. Despite its extensive excavations, archaeologists have found no evidence of warfare, defensive walls, or weapons designed for human combat. This absence of militaristic artifacts suggests that Carril's builders achieved urban complexity through cooperation and trade rather than conquest and coercion, offering a rare glimpse of civilization organized around principles other than violence and domination. The inhabitants of Carril were sophisticated engineers who solved complex problems of urban living in a challenging desert environment. They developed irrigation systems that channeled water from the Supe River to agricultural fields, supporting crops of cotton, beans, squash, and sweet potatoes that fed the urban population. The city's layout incorporated careful consideration of prevailing winds and solar orientation, creating microclimates that made desert living more comfortable. Archaeological evidence reveals a society organized around religious ceremonies and astronomical observations that connected earthly activities with cosmic cycles. The pyramids and plazas of Carril were designed to facilitate large gatherings for rituals that probably involved music, dancing, and offerings to deities associated with fertility and agricultural abundance. Circular sunken courts found throughout the site suggest ceremonies that brought communities together in shared spiritual experience. The people of Carril were accomplished musicians who created some of the world's oldest known musical instruments. Archaeologists have discovered beautifully crafted flutes made from animal bones and bird bones, some decorated with intricate carvings that demonstrate both artistic skill and sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles. These instruments suggest that music played an important role in religious ceremonies and social gatherings that reinforced community bonds. Trade networks connected Carril to distant regions throughout Peru and beyond. bringing exotic materials that enhanced the city's prosperity and cultural sophistication. Coastal resources like shellfish and seaweed were exchanged for highland products including coloured stones and medicinal plants. This economic system supported craft specialists who created textiles, jewellery and ceremonial objects that demonstrated remarkable technical and artistic achievement. The gradual abandonment of Caral around 2000 BCE coincided with climate changes that may have disrupted the delicate balance between urban needs and environmental resources. Reduced river flow and shifting weather patterns could have undermined agricultural systems that supported the city's population, forcing residents to seek more reliable water sources elsewhere. The site was peacefully abandoned rather than destroyed, suggesting planned relocation rather than catastrophic collapse. Recent research at Caral continues to reveal new aspects of this ancient civilization and its connections to later Indian cultures. The social and architectural innovations pioneered at Caral influenced the development of subsequent civilizations throughout Peru, establishing patterns of urban organization, religious practice, and artistic expression that persisted for thousands of years. The legacy of Caral demonstrates that human societies can achieve remarkable complexity and sophistication through cooperation rather than conflict. In a world often dominated by militaristic interpretations of early civilization, Caral stands as proof that our ancestors were capable of building impressive urban centers based on trade, ceremony, and shared cultural values rather than conquest and coercion, offering hope that peaceful paths to progress remain possible even in our modern world. The Norte Chico. Along Peru's central coast, where desert rivers create ribbons of green life through landscapes of sand and stone, emerged one of the world's first complex civilizations, the Norte Chico culture, flourishing between 350 and 1800 BCE. Created a network of urban centers that predated the rise of cities in China and India by over 1,000 years. This remarkable civilization, also known as the Coral Supe culture, built their monuments and cities during the same period when Europeans were still living in scattered farming villages, proving that the pathway to urban complexity could emerge independently in any corner of the world where conditions favored innovation and cooperation. The Norte Chico region contains over 30 major archaeological sites scattered across 4 river valleys, each representing a sophisticated urban center with monumental architecture, residential districts, and ceremonial complexes. These cities were connected by networks of trade and cultural exchange that created the America's first known civilization, achievement all the more remarkable for having occurred without pottery, metal tools, or written language, as these technologies are traditionally understood. Archaeological investigations reveal that Norte Chico cities were planned communities designed according to sophisticated principles of urban organization. Aspero, one of the largest sites, covered over 35 acres and featured massive pyramid complexes surrounded by residential areas, workshop districts and storage facilities that demonstrate careful consideration of functional relationships between different urban activities. The scale and coordination required for these construction projects implies social organizations capable of mobilizing thousands of workers over extended periods. The economic foundation of Norte Chico civilization rested on an ingenious adaptation to Peru's coastal environment that combined marine resources with agricultural production. Coastal communities specialized in fishing and shellfish gathering, while inland settlements focused on cotton cultivation and food crops irrigated by seasonal river flows. This complementary economic system created interdependencies that encouraged trade, cooperation, and cultural unity across the region. Cotton played a particularly crucial role in Norte Chico society, serving not only as the raw material for textiles but also as the fiber for fishing nets that made marine exploitation possible. Archaeological evidence suggests that cotton cultivation was one of the driving forces behind urban development, as the coordination required for large-scale fiber production encouraged the social innovations that made complex societies possible. The religious and ceremonial life of Norte Chico communities centered around elaborate architectural complexes that combined pyramids, plazas, and sunken courts in arrangements designed to accommodate large gatherings. These ceremonial centers suggest that religious activities played crucial roles in maintaining social cohesion and coordinating economic activities across the region. The uniformity of architectural styles and ceremonial layouts implies shared religious beliefs and cultural practices that unified diverse communities. Norte Chico artisans developed sophisticated techniques for working with available materials despite lacking the metal tools and ceramic technologies that characterized other early civilizations. They created intricate textiles using cotton and other plant fibers, carved elaborate objects from stone and bone, and produced a variety of tools and ornaments that demonstrate both technical skill and artistic sensibility. The social organization of Norte Chico communities appears to have been relatively egalitarian, with archaeological evidence suggesting minimal wealth differences between individuals or families. This pattern contrasts sharply with the highly stratified societies that characterized many other early civilizations, suggesting that complex urban life could emerge through cooperative rather than hierarchical social arrangements. Climate change and environmental degradation may have contributed to the decline of Norte Chico civilization around 1800 BCE. Evidence suggests that prolonged droughts reduced river flows and undermined agricultural systems that supported urban populations. The transition to new subsistence strategies and settlement patterns marked the end of this remarkable experiment in early urban living. The legacy of Norte Chico civilization influenced the development of later Andean cultures, including the Chavin, Moche, and eventually the Inca. Many architectural innovations, agricultural techniques, and social practices pioneered by Norte Chico communities persisted in modified forms throughout Peruvian prehistory, establishing cultural foundations that endured for over 4,000 years until the Spanish conquest transformed the region's cultural landscape forever. The Tartessos. In the fertile valleys of southwestern Spain, where the Guadalquivir River meanders toward the Atlantic through landscapes of olive groves and ancient hills, once flourished a kingdom so wealthy that Greek poets sang of its riches, and biblical writers may have called it Tarshish. Tartessos emerged around 1000 BCE as one of Europe's first literate civilizations outside the Mediterranean heartland, creating a unique culture that blended indigenous Iberian traditions with influences from Phoenician traders and Greek colonists, who sailed west in search of the silver and gold that made this land legendary. The kingdom of Tartessos controlled the mineral wealth of the Iberian Peninsula during the early Iron Age, transforming raw ores into finished goods that were traded throughout the ancient world. Silver mines in the Rio Tinto region produced unprecedented quantities of precious metal, while copper deposits provided materials for bronze working that supplied markets from Britain to the Black Sea. This mineral abundance attracted merchants from across the Mediterranean and established Tartessos as a crucial link in ancient trade networks. Archaeological evidence reveals a sophisticated society that developed its own distinctive artistic traditions while absorbing innovations from visiting traders and settlers. Tartessian craftsmen created intricate jewelry, decorated weapons, and ceremonial objects that combined local techniques with imported styles and materials. The famous Carambolo treasure, discovered near Seville, includes gold jewelry of extraordinary beauty that demonstrates the technical and artistic achievements possible when abundant resources met skilled craftsmanship. The Tartessians developed their own writing system, adapting scripts learned from Phoenician contacts to record their indigenous language. Inscriptions found throughout southwestern Spain demonstrate literacy that was rare in Iron Age Europe, suggesting a level of administrative sophistication and cultural development that matched contemporary civilizations in the Eastern Mediterranean. Unfortunately, most Tartessian texts remain undeciphered, leaving many aspects of their culture and beliefs mysterious. Tartessian society was organized around fortified settlements called oppida that served as centers for metalworking, trade, and regional administration. These proto-urban centers featured defensive walls, specialized craft quarters, and elite residences that reflect increasing social stratification as wealth from mining and trade created powerful ruling classes. The largest settlements may have housed several thousand people, making them among Europe's earliest true cities outside the classical world. The religious practices of the Tartessians combined indigenous Iberian traditions with influences from Eastern Mediterranean cultures brought by Phoenician and Greek visitors. Archaeological evidence suggests worship of fertility goddesses, solar deities and spirits associated with mining and metalworking. Sacred sites often featured elaborate offerings of weapons, jewelry and imported goods that demonstrated both religious devotion and economic prosperity. Greek sources describe Tartessian kings of legendary wealth and longevity, including the famous king Arganthonios, who supposedly ruled for 80 years and lived. While these accounts may be exaggerated, they reflect genuine Greek amazement at Tartessian prosperity and the stable political institutions that made long-term development possible. The kingdom's rulers apparently maintained friendly relationships with both Phoenician traders and Greek colonists, balancing competing influences while preserving Tartessian independence. The decline of Tartessos around 500 BCE coincided with Carthaginian expansion in the Western Mediterranean and changing patterns of international trade that reduced demand for Iberian metals. Political instability, resource depletion, and pressure from expanding Carthaginian territories may have combined to undermine the economic foundations of Tartessian prosperity. The kingdom gradually fragmented into smaller tribal units that lacked the resources and organization of their predecessors. Roman conquest of the Iberian Peninsula in the 2nd century BCE brought new technologies and administrative systems that transformed the region's cultural landscape. However, Tartessian influences persisted in local artistic traditions, religious practices, and settlement patterns that continued to shape Iberian development under Roman rule. Modern Andalusia preserves many cultural elements that can be traced back to its Tartessian heritage. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Tartessian civilization and its connections to the broader ancient world. Underwater excavations along the Spanish coast have recovered evidence of ancient harbors and trading posts, while analysis of metal artifacts provides insights into Tartessian technological innovations and commercial relationships that extended from the Atlantic to the Eastern Mediterranean. The Tocharians. In the heart of Central Asia, where the Taklamakan Desert stretches between mountain ranges like a sea of sand and shifting dunes, flourished a people whose very existence challenges our understanding of ancient migration and cultural exchange. The Tocharians, speaking Indo-European languages in the midst of Turkic and Chinese populations, created oasis civilizations along the Silk Road that served as crucial links between East and West for over a millennium. Their cities, preserved by the desert's dry climate, have yielded manuscripts, textiles, and artwork that reveal a remarkably cosmopolitan culture that blended influences from India, Persia, Greece, and China into something uniquely their own. The Tocharian kingdoms of Kucha, Karashar, and other oasis states controlled vital segments of the Silk Road trade routes that connected the Roman Empire with Han Dynasty China. These strategic locations allowed Tocharian merchants to accumulate enormous wealth by facilitating commerce between civilizations that were often unaware of each other's existence. Caravans carrying silk, spices, precious stones, and ideas passed through Tocharian territories, leaving behind cultural influences that created one of history's most diverse and sophisticated societies. Archaeological discoveries in the Tarim Basin have revealed Tocharian cities that combined practical desert adaptations with remarkable artistic achievements. Elaborate Buddhist monasteries featured wall paintings that depicted scenes from Indian religious texts rendered in artistic styles that incorporated Greek, Persian, and Chinese elements. These frescoes demonstrate a culture comfortable with multiple religious and philosophical traditions, adapting foreign ideas to local needs while maintaining distinctive Tocharian characteristics. The Tocharian languages, preserved in thousands of manuscripts written on paper, wood, and silk, belong to the Indo-European family, but developed in isolation from their European relatives for over 2 millennia. These texts include Buddhist religious writings, commercial documents, administrative records, and literary works that provide unprecedented insights into daily life in Silk Road cities. The discovery of Tocharian languages, revolutionized our understanding of Indo-European expansion and the complexity of ancient Central Asian societies. Tocharian textiles, preserved by the desert climate, represent some of the finest examples of ancient weaving and dyeing techniques. Silk fabrics decorated with intricate patterns demonstrate technical skills that rivaled anything produced in contemporary China or Persia, while woolen textiles show influences from nomadic traditions adapted to urban sensibilities. These textiles were not merely practical necessities but artistic statements that reflected the cultural sophistication and economic prosperity of Tocharian society. The religious life of the Tocharians was dominated by Buddhism, but their interpretation of Buddhist teachings incorporated elements from Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, and local shamanistic traditions. Tocharian Buddhist art and literature show creative adaptations of Indian religious concepts to Central Asian cultural contexts, creating distinctive forms of Buddhist practice that influenced religious development throughout the Silk Road region. Tocharian women appear to have enjoyed relatively high status in society, with evidence suggesting they could own property, engage in business, and participate in religious activities on nearly equal terms with men. This gender equality was remarkable for its time and place, possibly reflecting nomadic traditions or the practical necessities of life in isolated desert oases where everyone's contributions were essential for survival. The decline of Tocharian civilization began around 1000 CE, as Turkic peoples gradually displaced Indo-European populations throughout Central Asia. Climate change may have reduced water supplies that supported oasis agriculture, while political instability disrupted trade routes that provided economic foundations for Tocharian prosperity. The lost Tocharian speakers probably disappeared in the early 2nd millennium CE, leaving behind only their remarkable archaeological legacy. Modern rediscovery of Tocharian civilization began in the early 20th century, when European and Japanese expeditions to Central Asia uncovered preserved cities and manuscripts that had been lost for centuries. These discoveries revealed the existence of a major civilization that had been completely forgotten by history, demonstrating how much of the human past remains hidden beneath desert sands and scholarly assumptions. The legacy of the Tocharians extends far beyond their immediate geographical and temporal boundaries. Their role as cultural intermediaries along the Silk Road facilitate exchanges between East and West that shaped the development of art, religion, and technology throughout Eurasia, proving that even societies that seem peripheral to major civilizations can play crucial roles in human cultural development. Sanqingdui. In the fertile Chengdu plain of southwestern China, where the Min River flows through landscapes of rice paddies and bamboo groves, archaeologists have uncovered one of the most mysterious and spectacular civilizations in Chinese history. Sanqingdui, dating to around 1200–1000 BCE, produced bronze artifacts so extraordinary and unlike anything else in ancient China that their discovery in the 1980s forced scholars to completely reconsider the origins and development of Chinese civilization. The site's famous bronze masks, with their bulging eyes and otherworldly expressions, seemed to gaze across millennia from a culture that developed in apparent isolation from the Yellow River civilizations traditionally considered the cradle of Chinese culture. The bronze casting technology at Sanqingdui reached levels of sophistication that rival anything achieved in the ancient world. The site's workshops produced massive bronze trees, some standing over 12 feet tall and decorated with intricate birds, flowers, and mythological creatures that demonstrate both technical mastery and artistic vision of unprecedented complexity. These monumental sculptures required advanced metallurgical knowledge and organizational capabilities that suggest a highly developed civilization with specialized craftsmen and substantial economic resources. The most famous artifacts from Sanqingdui are the bronze masks and heads that display artistic conventions completely unlike contemporary Chinese traditions. These faces feature protruding eyes, elaborate hairdresses, and sometimes gilded surfaces that create an impression of supernatural beings or deified rulers. The largest masks measure over 4 feet wide and appear to have been designed for ceremonial display rather than human wear, suggesting religious practices that involved communion with spirits or ancestors of enormous power and importance. Archaeological evidence reveals that Sansingdui was part of the Shu Kingdom, a Bronze Age civilization that controlled much of what is now Sichuan province. This kingdom appears to have developed independently of the Shang dynasty civilization that dominated northern China during the same period, creating distinctive cultural traditions that show little influence from the Yellow River region. The isolation of Shu culture challenges traditional narratives about Chinese civilization developing from a single northern center. The religious beliefs represented in Sansingdui art remain largely mysterious, but the artifacts suggest a complex cosmology that emphasized relationships between earthly rulers and supernatural forces. Bronze trees may have represented connections between different levels of existence, while the elaborate masks and heads could have depicted deities or ancestral spirits that governed fertility, warfare, and royal authority. The scale and craftsmanship of these objects indicate religious practices that commanded enormous resources and social energy. Recent excavations at Sansingdui have yielded thousands of additional artifacts, including jade objects, gold masks, silk textiles, and ivory carvings that demonstrate trade connections extending far beyond southwestern China. These exotic materials suggest that the Shu Kingdom participated in extensive commercial networks that brought luxury goods from Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and possibly even more distant regions. Such trade relationships imply diplomatic and economic sophistication that matched any contemporary civilization. The writing system used by the Shu Kingdom remains undeciphered, with symbols found on bronze and pottery objects showing no clear relationship to early Chinese characters. This independent development of writing suggests that Sansingdui culture achieved literacy without influence from northern Chinese traditions, supporting arguments that complex civilization emerged independently in multiple regions of ancient China rather than spreading from a single source. The sudden abandonment of Sansingdui around 1000 BCE coincided with the deliberate burial of thousands of precious artifacts in specially constructed pits. This massive sacrifice of wealth may have been connected to political upheaval, religious transformation, or natural disasters that forced the inhabitants to abandon their city. The careful arrangement of objects in the burial pits suggests ritual significance rather than simple hiding of valuables. The discovery of Sansingdui has revolutionized understanding of Bronze Age China by revealing the existence of sophisticated civilizations that developed outside traditional cultural centers. These findings demonstrate that ancient China was far more diverse and complex than previously imagined, with multiple independent kingdoms creating distinctive artistic and cultural traditions that contributed to the eventual emergence of unified Chinese civilization under later dynasties. The Vinca Culture. In the rolling hills along the Danube River, where fertile valleys stretch between forested ridges in the heart of the Balkans, flourished one of Europe's most sophisticated Neolithic civilizations. The Vinca culture, spanning from roughly 500–700 to 4500 BCE, created settlements that housed thousands of people in what may have been Europe's first true towns. Their achievements in metallurgy, urban planning, and symbolic communication were so advanced that they preceded similar developments elsewhere in Europe by over a millennium, challenging traditional assumptions about the pace and direction of cultural evolution in prehistoric societies. The largest Vinca settlement at Below Bredo covered over 100 acres and supported a population that may have reached 10,000 people, making it one of the largest communities in the world during the 6th millennium BCE. This proto-urban center featured planned streets, specialized craft quarters, and multi-story houses built from sophisticated mud brick construction techniques that demonstrate remarkable engineering knowledge. The site's impressive defensive works and organized layout suggest social institutions capable of coordinating complex community projects across multiple generations. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Vinca culture developed what may be Europe's earliest writing system, centuries before the invention of writing in Mesopotamia. Hundreds of artifacts bear incised symbols that appear to follow consistent rules and patterns, suggesting systematic communication rather than random decoration. These proto-scripts found on pottery, figurines, and other objects remain largely undeciphered, but represent humanity's earliest known attempts at symbolic recording in southeastern Europe. Vinca metallurgists were among the world's first copper workers, developing techniques for extracting and shaping metal that gave them significant technological advantages over neighbouring cultures. Still dependent on stone tools, archaeological evidence reveals sophisticated understanding of ore processing, smelting temperatures, and alloy creation that allowed Vinca craftsmen to produce tools, weapons, and ornaments of unprecedented quality and durability. This early mastery of metallurgy may have provided economic advantages that supported their complex urban societies. The artistic achievements of the Vinca culture demonstrate sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic thinking that reveal remarkable cultural sophistication. Their distinctive figurines, particularly the elegant female forms with elaborate hairstyles and clothing, suggest religious or ceremonial practices that emphasized feminine power and fertility. These artifacts show standardized artistic conventions that persisted across the culture's entire geographical range, indicating shared belief systems and cultural unity. Archaeological evidence suggests that Vinca society was relatively egalitarian, with houses showing minimal variation in size or luxury, despite the settlement's obvious prosperity. This pattern contrasts with the highly stratified societies that characterized many other early urban civilizations, suggesting that complex community organization could emerge through cooperative rather than hierarchical social arrangements. The absence of obvious palaces or royal burials supports this interpretation of Vinca social structure. The religious and ceremonial life of the Vinca people centered around sophisticated ritual practices that may have involved ancestor worship, fertility ceremonies, and seasonal celebrations connected to agricultural cycles. Elaborate shrines found within settlements feature mysterious installations and artifact arrangements that suggest complex spiritual beliefs requiring specialized knowledge and community participation to maintain properly. The decline of the Vinca culture around 400 and 500 BCE coincided with climate changes and possible invasions by nomadic peoples from the steppes. Archaeological evidence shows that many Vinca settlements were burned and abandoned during this period, marking the end of southeastern Europe's first experiment in urban living. The cultural innovations pioneered by the Vinca people influenced subsequent developments throughout the region, but were not directly continued by later societies. Modern research techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Vinca achievement and influence. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of sophisticated agricultural systems, extensive trade networks, and technological innovations that demonstrate the remarkable capabilities of these early European urbanites. The Vinca culture stands as proof that human ingenuity and social cooperation can create complex civilizations anywhere. Conditions favor innovation and community development. The legacy of the Vinca culture reminds us that the path to civilization has been walked many times by many different peoples, each finding their own solutions to the challenges of urban living, social organization, and cultural expression. In the Danube valleys where they once thrived, their achievements continue to inspire wonder at the human capacity for creating something greater than the sum of individual efforts. The Beaker People. Across the windswept landscapes of prehistoric Europe, from the Atlantic shores of Portugal to the misty highlands of Scotland, wandered a people whose distinctive bell-shaped pottery vessels have given them their name and provided archaeologists with one of the clearest examples of ancient cultural spread. The Beaker people flourished between 200-800 and 1800 BCE, during the crucial transition from the Neolithic to the Bronze Age, carrying with them innovations in metallurgy, archery, and social organization that would transform European society forever. The characteristic beaker pottery that defines this culture represents far more than simple drinking vessels. These elegantly crafted containers, with their distinctive inverted bell shape and intricate geometric decorations, appear to have held special significance in Beaker society. Archaeological evidence suggests they were used for consuming alcoholic beverages, possibly fermented honey mead or barley beer, during ceremonies that marked important social transitions, trade agreements, or religious observances that bound communities together across vast distances. What makes the Beaker people truly remarkable is not their pottery, but their role as Europe's first metallurgists on a continental scale. They pioneered techniques for working copper and later bronze that gave them significant technological advantages over Neolithic communities. Still dependent on stone tools, beaker graves consistently contain copper daggers, gold ornaments, and archery equipment that demonstrate both technical sophistication and social status, based on control of new technologies. The spread of beaker culture across Europe represents one of prehistory's most successful examples of cultural diffusion. Within a few centuries, beaker-style pottery, metalworking techniques, and burial customs appeared from Ireland to Hungary, suggesting either massive population movements or remarkably effective cultural transmission through trade and intermarriage. This rapid expansion transformed European society by introducing new technologies and social practices that persisted long after beaker culture itself had evolved into other traditions. Beaker burials reveal a society organized around individual achievement and personal status, rather than collective identity. Unlike earlier Neolithic cultures that emphasized communal burial practices, beaker graves typically contain single individuals accompanied by personal possessions including weapons, tools, ornaments, and of course the distinctive pottery vessels. This shift toward individual burial practices reflects broader changes in European society as metallurgy and long-distance trade created new forms of wealth and social differentiation. The archery equipment found in beaker graves demonstrates sophisticated understanding of projectile technology that gave these people significant military and hunting advantages. Stone arrowheads were crafted with precision that rivals modern flint knapping, while wrist guards made from stone or metal protected archers from bowstring impacts during rapid shooting. This emphasis on archery technology may have facilitated beaker expansion by providing military superiority over communities still relying on close combat weapons. Archaeological evidence suggests that beaker communities were highly mobile, following seasonal patterns that combined pastoralism with opportunistic agriculture and resource exploitation. This nomadic lifestyle allowed them to maintain cultural connections across enormous distances, while adapting to local environmental conditions and opportunities. Their flexibility and mobility gave them significant advantages during a period of climate change and cultural transition. The genetic legacy of the Beaker people has been revealed through recent advances in ancient DNA analysis. Studies show that Beaker expansion involved substantial population replacement in some regions, particularly in Britain, where incoming Beaker peoples largely replaced earlier Neolithic populations. However, in other areas like Iberia, Beaker culture spread through cultural adoption rather than population replacement, demonstrating the complex nature of prehistoric cultural change. The decline of distinctive Beaker culture around 1800 BCE coincided with the full emergence of Bronze Age societies that absorbed and developed Beaker innovations. Rather than disappearing, Beaker traditions evolved into the diverse Bronze Age cultures that would dominate European prehistory for the next millennium. Their legacy includes not only technological innovations but also social practices and cultural patterns that influenced European development for thousands of years. Modern archaeology continues to reveal new aspects of Beaker society and their role in European prehistory. Recent discoveries include elaborate burial sites, evidence of long-distance trade networks, and technological innovations that demonstrate the sophistication and influence of these remarkable people who helped bridge the gap between Europe's Neolithic past and Bronze Age future. The Cucuteni-Trypillia. In the fertile river valleys of Eastern Europe, where the Dnieper and Dniester flow through landscapes of black earth and endless steppes, flourished one of prehistory's most enigmatic civilizations. The Cucuteni-Trypillia culture, spanning from roughly 500 to 27 to 50 BCE, created some of Europe's largest Neolithic settlements while developing artistic traditions of extraordinary beauty and sophistication. Their most puzzling legacy is a practice that defies easy explanation. Every few generations, they deliberately burned their own cities to the ground, only to rebuild them in precisely the same locations. The mega-settlements of the Cucuteni-Trypillia people represent Europe's first experiments in urban living on a massive scale. Sites like Talianki and Dobrovi covered areas larger than many modern cities, with populations that may have reached 15,000 people arranged in enteric circles of houses, workshops, and ceremonial areas. These settlements were carefully planned communities that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of urban organization, resource management, and social coordination centuries before similar achievements elsewhere in Europe. The pottery created by Cucuteni-Trypillia artisans ranks among the finest achievements of prehistoric European art. Their ceramics feature intricate spiral patterns, stylized animal designs, and geometric motifs painted in rich earth tones that create visual effects of remarkable complexity and beauty. These decorative schemes appear to follow consistent symbolic conventions that may have conveyed information about clan identity, religious beliefs, or seasonal ceremonies that governed community life. Archaeological evidence reveals a society organized around sophisticated agricultural practices that supported dense populations without apparent environmental degradation. Cucuteni-Trypillia farmers developed intensive cultivation techniques that maintained soil fertility across multiple generations, while also engaging in animal husbandry that provided meat, milk, and materials for clothing and tools. Their agricultural success allowed craft specialization and population growth that created some of prehistory's most impressive settlements. The mysterious practice of deliberate settlement burning remains one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. Every 60 to 80 years, Cucuteni-Trypillia communities would systematically set fire to their own houses, destroying accumulated possessions and infrastructure before rebuilding in the same locations. This cyclical destruction and renewal may have been connected to religious beliefs, social renewal ceremonies, or practical considerations related to building maintenance and pest control. The social organization of Cucuteni-Trypillia settlements appears to have been remarkably egalitarian, with houses showing minimal variation in size or luxury, despite the settlement's obvious prosperity. This pattern suggests social systems based on kinship and community cooperation rather than hierarchical authority and wealth accumulation. The absence of obvious elite residences or defensive fortifications indicates a society that valued collective welfare over individual aggrandizement. Cucuteni-Trypillia religious practices centered around elaborate female figurines that may have represented mother goddesses or fertility spirits. These carefully crafted sculptures, often featuring elaborate headdresses and detailed clothing, suggest spiritual beliefs that emphasized feminine power and the connection between human fertility and agricultural abundance. The prominence of these figurines in household contexts indicates that religious practice was integrated into daily life rather than restricted to specialized temples or priestly classes. The decline of Cucuteni-Trypillia civilization around 275 BCE coincided with climate changes and the expansion of pastoral peoples from the steppes. Cooler, drier conditions may have undermined agricultural systems that supported dense populations, while pressure from mobile herding societies disrupted the stable territorial arrangements that made mega-settlements possible. The transition marked the end of Europe's first urban experiment and the beginning of new cultural patterns based on mobility and metallurgy. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Cucuteni-Trypillia achievement and influence. Advanced imaging techniques have identified previously unknown settlements and revealed the true extent of their territorial control, while analysis of artifacts provides insights into their technological capabilities and cultural connections. These findings confirm that the Cucuteni-Trypillia people created one of prehistory's most remarkable civilizations, demonstrating humanity's early capacity for large-scale community organization and artistic achievement in the challenging environment of Eastern European prehistory. The Jomon Culture, on the volcanic islands of Japan, where cherry blossoms bloom each spring above landscapes shaped by earthquakes and ancient forests, flourished one of the world's most enduring and sophisticated hunter-gatherer societies. The Jomon Culture, spanning an extraordinary 14,000 years from roughly 16,000 to 300 BCE, created the world's oldest known pottery while developing sustainable ways of life that supported complex settlements without agriculture. Their name, meaning cord-marked, comes from the distinctive rope pattern decorations that adorned their ceramic vessels, some of which rank among humanity's most artistic achievements. The longevity of Jomon culture represents one of history's most successful examples of sustainable human adaptation to environmental conditions. For over 140 centuries, Jomon communities thrived in the Japanese archipelago by developing sophisticated techniques for exploiting marine and forest resources without depleting them. This remarkable achievement challenges assumptions about the inevitability of agricultural development and demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies could achieve complexity and stability that rivaled agricultural civilizations. Jomon pottery, beginning around 16,000 years ago, predates ceramic traditions elsewhere in the world by several millennia. These vessels evolved from simple utilitarian containers to elaborate artistic creations featuring flame-like decorations, spiral patterns, and sculptural elements that transform ordinary cooking pots into masterpieces of prehistoric art. The technical sophistication required to fire these ceramics demonstrates advanced understanding of clay preparation, kiln construction, and temperature control that developed over thousands of years. The settlements of the Middle and Late Jomon periods featured permanent villages with substantial pit houses, elaborate storage facilities, and ceremonial structures that indicate complex social organization among people who never developed agriculture. Sites like Sane Maruyama in northern Honshu contained hundreds of dwellings arranged around central plazas, supported by sophisticated resource management systems that sustained populations of several thousand people through seasonal hunting, fishing, and gathering. Jomon's spiritual life centered around elaborate ritual practices that emphasized connections between human communities and the natural world. Clay figurines called dogo, often depicting female forms with exaggerated features and mysterious symbolic elements, may have served as fertility charms, healing talismans, or representations of spiritual beings. These artifacts suggest religious beliefs that integrated daily life with cosmic cycles and supernatural forces governing natural abundance. The subsistence strategies developed by Jomon peoples demonstrate remarkable ecological knowledge and adaptive flexibility. They harvested salmon during seasonal runs, collected shellfish from coastal waters, gathered nuts and roots from deciduous forests, and hunted deer and wild boar using sophisticated techniques that maintained animal populations over millennia. This diverse resource base provided nutritional security that supported population growth and cultural development without environmental degradation. Archaeological evidence reveals that Jomon society was organized around principles of cooperation and resource sharing rather than hierarchical authority or wealth accumulation. Settlements show minimal evidence of social stratification, while burial practices suggest egalitarian values that emphasize community membership over individual status. This social organization may have contributed to the remarkable stability and longevity that characterized Jomon culture. The artistic achievements of Jomon craftsmen extended beyond pottery to include carved wooden objects, stone sculptures, and elaborate personal ornaments that demonstrate sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities. Their artistic traditions show continuous development over thousands of years, with regional variations that reflect local environmental conditions and cultural preferences, while maintaining distinctive Jomon characteristics. The gradual transition from Jomon to Yayoi culture around 300 BCE marked the introduction of rice agriculture and metallurgy to Japan through contact with mainland Asian civilizations. This transformation ended the long Jomon period but preserved many cultural elements that continued to influence Japanese development. Modern Japanese culture retains Jomon influences in artistic traditions, spiritual practices, and attitudes toward nature that reflect the deep roots of Japanese civilization. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of Jomon achievement and influence. Advanced dating techniques have confirmed the antiquity of Jomon pottery and settlement patterns, while environmental archaeology provides insights into their sophisticated resource management strategies. These findings demonstrate that the Jomon people created one of humanity's most successful and enduring cultural adaptations, proving that complex societies could thrive for millennia through careful balance between human needs and environmental limit. The Ubaid culture. In the ancient marshlands of southern Mesopotamia, where rivers once braided through reed beds and shallow lagoons before emptying into the Persian Gulf, emerged the culture that laid the foundations for all later Mesopotamian civilizations. The Ubaid people, flourishing between 6500 and 3800 BCE, transformed the waterlogged landscape into productive farmland, while pioneering irrigation techniques, temple architecture, and social organization that would influence human development for millennia. Their most mysterious legacy consists of strange figurines with elongated heads and reptilian features that seem to depict beings from another world entirely. The Ubaid period represents humanity's first successful colonization of the Mesopotamian alluvial plain, a challenging environment that required sophisticated engineering to make habitable. These pioneers developed irrigation systems that channeled river water to agricultural fields, creating the surplus production that would eventually support the world's first cities. Their mastery of water management established patterns of environmental modification that shaped Mesopotamian civilization from its origins through the fall of Babylon. Ubaid settlements gradually evolved from small farming villages into proto-urban centers that featured monumental architecture and specialized craft production. The temples constructed during this period established architectural traditions that would persist throughout Mesopotamian history, with raised platforms, buttressed walls, and elaborately decorated facades that combined practical functions with religious symbolism. These buildings demonstrate planning and construction capabilities that required coordinated labor from entire communities. The pottery created by Ubaid craftsmen represents a significant technological and artistic achievement in prehistoric Mesopotamia. Their distinctive ceramics, decorated with geometric patterns painted in dark pigments on buff-colored clay, show standardized forms and decorative schemes that suggest specialized production and widespread distribution. The appearance of similar pottery styles across vast territories indicates cultural unity or extensive trade networks that connected communities from the Persian Gulf to eastern Turkey. The mysterious figurines that characterize Ubaid culture have inspired considerable speculation about their meaning and purpose. These clay sculptures typically depict human forms with elongated skulls, slanted eyes, and broad shoulders that create an otherworldly appearance, unlike anything in contemporary art. Some figures hold infants in poses suggesting maternal care, while others appear in more abstract or ritualistic contexts that hint at religious or ceremonial significance. Archaeological evidence suggests that Ubaid society was organized around emerging social hierarchies based on control of agricultural surplus and religious authority. The concentration of wealth in temple complexes indicates that religious institutions played crucial economic roles in addition to their spiritual functions. This integration of religious and economic power established patterns that would characterize Mesopotamian civilization for thousands of years. The subsistence base of Ubaid culture combined sophisticated agriculture with exploitation of marsh and marine resources that provided dietary diversity and economic opportunities. Date palms, barley and wheat formed agricultural staples, while fishing, fowling and shellfish gathering supplemented plant foods with animal protein. This diverse resource base supported population growth and the development of specialized crafts that marked the transition toward urban civilization. Ubaid communities developed long-distance trade networks that brought exotic materials from distant regions to southern Mesopotamia, obsidian from Anatolia, copper from highland sources, and semi-precious stones from Iran and Afghanistan appear in Ubaid archaeological context, demonstrating commercial relationships that spanned hundreds of miles. These trade connections facilitated not only material exchange but also the spread of ideas and technologies that enriched Ubaid culture. The transition from Ubaid to Uruk period around 300-800 BCE marked the emergence of true urban civilization in Mesopotamia, but Ubaid cultural foundations persisted in the cities that followed. Temple architecture, irrigation techniques, and social organization pioneered during the Ubaid period continued to shape Mesopotamian development through the rise and fall of successive empires. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Ubaid achievement and influence. Recent excavations have discovered previously unknown settlements and architectural complexes, while analysis of artifacts provides insights into Ubaid technology, trade relationships, and social organization. These findings confirm that the Ubaid period represents a crucial phase in human cultural evolution, when the foundations were laid for the complex urban civilizations that would dominate human history for the next 5,000 years. The poverty point culture. In the swampy bottomlands of northeastern Louisiana, where the Mississippi River once meandered through landscapes of cypress swamps and hardwood forests, ancient hunter-gatherers created one of North America's most impressive earthwork complexes. Poverty Point, constructed between 1700 and 1100 BCE, features massive concentric ridges arranged in a precise semicircular pattern that spans over 900 acres, demonstrating organizational capabilities and engineering skills that challenge assumptions about what hunter-gatherer societies could achieve. These earthworks required moving millions of cubic feet of soil using nothing more than baskets and human labor, creating a monument that rivals anything built by agricultural civilizations of the same period. The geometric precision of Poverty Point's layout reveals sophisticated planning and astronomical knowledge that guided its construction. 6 concentric ridges form a semicircle bisected by a central axis that aligns with solar events, while massive mounds positioned around the complex may have served astronomical observation points or ceremonial purposes. This combination of engineering, geometry, and celestial observation suggests a society with specialized knowledge keepers who understood mathematical relationships and cosmic cycles. What makes Poverty Point truly remarkable is that its builders achieved this monumentality without agriculture, pottery, or permanent villages as traditionally understood. They were hunter-gatherers who developed intensive exploitation of wild resources to support population concentrations and labor mobilization that earlier scholars believed required agricultural surplus. Their economy was based on fishing, hunting, and gathering wild plants in an environment so rich that seasonal abundance supported complex social organization without farming. The massive earthen ridges that give Poverty Point its distinctive appearance served as foundations for houses and activity areas that created residential neighborhoods within the larger complex. Thousands of people may have gathered at Poverty Point during certain seasons, participating in ceremonies, trade activities, and construction projects that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity. This seasonal aggregation model challenges assumptions about the relationship between sedentism and social complexity. Poverty Point served as a major trade center that drew exotic materials from across eastern North America. Archaeological excavations have uncovered copper from the Great Lakes, galena from Missouri, soapstone from the Appalachians, and various cherts and stones from sources hundreds of miles away. This extensive trade network indicates that Poverty Point's influence extended far beyond Louisiana, connecting communities across the continent in commercial and cultural exchanges. The inhabitants of Poverty Point were master craftsmen who created distinctive artifacts despite lacking ceramic technology. They manufactured thousands of small baked clay objects in various shapes that served as cooking stones for boiling water and preparing food. These Poverty Point objects, found by the hundreds of thousands at the site, represent a unique technological solution to cooking needs that demonstrates innovation and adaptation to local conditions. The artwork created at Poverty Point includes finely carved stone beads, pendants, and small sculptures that demonstrate artistic sophistication and technical skill. Bird effigies, animal forms, and geometric designs appear on objects made from imported stones, suggesting religious or ceremonial significance that connected artistic expression with spiritual beliefs. The quality of these artifacts indicates specialized craftsmen who devoted significant time to creating objects of beauty rather than mere utility. The social organization required to build and maintain Poverty Point remains debated among archaeologists. The absence of obvious elite burials or residential areas suggests relatively egalitarian social structures, yet the coordination necessary for earthwork construction implies leadership roles and hierarchical organization. Perhaps Poverty Point society balanced communal decision-making with temporary leadership during construction seasons. The abandonment of Poverty Point around 100 BCE coincided with climate changes that may have altered resource availability in the lower Mississippi Valley, shifting river courses, changing forest composition, or declining fish populations could have undermined the subsistence base that supported seasonal gatherings and monumental construction. The site was gradually abandoned as communities dispersed to other locations better suited to changing environmental conditions. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Poverty Point culture and its broader significance. Remote sensing technology has identified previously unknown earthworks and settlement features, while analysis of artifacts provides insights into trade networks, technological capabilities, and social organization. These discoveries confirm that Poverty Point represents one of North America's most impressive prehistoric achievements, demonstrating that monumental architecture and complex society could emerge from hunter-gatherer adaptations to resource-rich environments. The Dilmun Civilization, on the island of Bahrain and the nearby Arabian coast, where fresh water springs bubble up from beneath the Persian Gulf's turquoise waters, flourished a civilization that ancient Sumerians believed was the earthly paradise, where humanity was created. Dilmun, thriving between 3000 and 600 BCE, served as the vital commercial link between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, transforming a small island into one of the ancient world's wealthiest trading centers. Sumerian texts describe Dilmun as a land where the sun rose, disease did not exist, and death was unknown, a mythical Eden that happened to be a very real and prosperous Bronze Age society. The strategic location of Dilmun made it indispensable to ancient trade networks that connected three of the world's earliest civilizations. Ships from Mesopotamia loaded with textiles and agricultural products sailed to Dilmun, where they exchanged goods with merchants from the Indus Valley carrying precious stones, ivory and exotic woods. This entrepot economy generated enormous wealth that supported urban development, monumental architecture, and a distinctive culture that blended influences from multiple civilizations. Archaeological evidence reveals a sophisticated society that developed its own architectural traditions while absorbing innovations from trading partners. Dilmun temples featured distinctive round towers and elaborate stone construction techniques that differed from both Mesopotamian and Indus Valley styles, suggesting independent cultural development alongside commercial integration. The quality of public buildings and residential structures indicates prosperity that extended beyond merchant elites to benefit broader segments of society. The famous burial mounds of Bahrain, numbering over 170,000 tumuli scattered across the island, represent one of the ancient world's largest necropolis complexes. These carefully constructed graves, ranging from simple stone chambers to elaborate multi-room tombs, contain artifacts that demonstrate Dilmun's connections to distant civilizations and its inhabitants' beliefs about death and the afterlife. The sheer number of burial mounds suggests either a very long period of continuous occupation or funerary practices that attracted people from across the region. Dilmun's identity as a sacred land in Mesopotamian mythology gave it religious significance that complemented its commercial importance. Sumerian texts describe Dilmun as the place where the god Enki provided fresh water, created vegetation and established it as a pure land where predators did not kill prey and disease did not afflict humans. This mythological status may have provided Dilmun with political advantages, making it neutral territory where merchants from different regions could trade peacefully. The inhabitants of Dilmun developed sophisticated water management systems that exploited the island's unusual geological features. Freshwater aquifers beneath the island created springs that flowed even in the middle of the sea, providing reliable water sources that supported agriculture and urban populations in an otherwise arid environment. This natural advantage, combined with strategic location, made Dilmun prosperity possible in a region where water scarcity limited most human activity. Dilmun pottery and other artifacts show distinctive local styles that evolved over millennia, while incorporating influences from trading partners. Red-ridged pottery characteristic of Dilmun appears in archaeological contexts from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, serving as a marker of Dilmun's commercial reach and cultural influence. These ceramic traditions demonstrate that Dilmun was not merely a passive middleman, but an active cultural force that contributed its own innovations to the ancient world. The religious practices of Dilmun remain somewhat mysterious, but archaeological evidence suggests a complex spiritual life that incorporated local traditions with imported beliefs. Temple complexes featured distinctive architectural elements that may have served astronomical observation functions alongside religious ceremonies. The integration of commercial, political, and religious activities in these structures reflects the multifaceted nature of ancient urban centers. The decline of Dilmun as a major trading power occurred gradually as political changes in Mesopotamia and the collapse of the Indus Valley civilization disrupted the trade networks that sustained its prosperity. By the first millennium BCE, Dilmun had become a province of various Mesopotamian empires, maintaining local identity while losing the commercial independence that had made it wealthy and powerful. Modern archaeological work in Bahrain continues to reveal new aspects of Dilmun civilization and its role in ancient world systems. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of sophisticated urban planning, advanced maritime technology, and cultural achievements that confirm Dilmun's importance as more than just a trading post, demonstrating that this small island society made significant contributions to the development of Bronze Age civilization across the ancient Near East. The Kerma culture, along the fertile banks of the Nile in what is now northern Sudan, where the river curves through landscapes of golden sand and ancient granite, flourished Africa's first indigenous urban civilization south of Egypt. The Kerma culture, thriving between 200 and 1500 and 1500 BCE, built a powerful kingdom that challenged Egyptian dominance and created architectural monuments that still rise from the desert like echoes of forgotten grandeur. Their massive mud brick structures, distinctive pottery, and elaborate burial practices reveal a sophisticated society that developed independently of their northern neighbors, while engaging with them through trade, diplomacy, and occasional warfare. The city of Kerma served as the capital of a kingdom that controlled the upper Nubian Nile for over a millennium, extracting wealth from gold mines, controlling trade routes, and managing agricultural resources that supported urban populations and monumental construction. At its height, Kerma rivaled Egyptian cities in size and sophistication, demonstrating that complex civilization could emerge in multiple centers along the Nile rather than spreading solely from Egypt southward as earlier scholars assumed. The architectural achievements of Kerma culture centered around massive structures called defufas, enormous mud brick buildings that combined religious, administrative, and possibly royal residential functions. The western defufa, largest of these structures, rises over 60 feet above the surrounding landscape, with walls over 15 feet thick at the base, creating an imposing monument that required sophisticated engineering knowledge and coordinated labor from thousands of workers over many years. Kerma pottery represents one of ancient Africa's finest ceramic traditions, featuring distinctive forms and decorative techniques that evolved over centuries into increasingly refined styles. The characteristic black-topped red ware created through carefully controlled firing techniques achieved surface qualities of remarkable beauty and consistency. These vessels were not merely utilitarian objects, but artistic achievements that reflected Kerma's cultural sophistication and technological capabilities. The burial practices of Kerma's elite reveal a society with elaborate beliefs about death and the afterlife that rivaled Egyptian funerary traditions in complexity. Royal tumuli contained the bodies of rulers accompanied by hundreds of sacrificed retainers, along with enormous quantities of grave goods including pottery, jewelry, weapons, and imported luxury items. These mass burials, while disturbing to modern sensibilities, demonstrate the power of Kerma's rulers and the religious beliefs that made such sacrifices acceptable. Archaeological evidence indicates that Kerma maintained complex relationships with Egypt that alternated between trade partnership and military conflict. During periods of Egyptian weakness, Kerma expanded northward to control territories in Lower Nubia, while Egyptian military strength pushed Kerma influence back south. This dynamic relationship shaped the development of both civilizations, with cultural and technological exchanges occurring even during hostile periods. The economic foundation of Kerma's prosperity rested on control of trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. Gold, ivory, ebony, incense, and exotic animal skins flowed north through Kerma's territories, while manufactured goods, grain and luxury items moved south. This position as commercial intermediary generated wealth that supported Kerma's urban development and military capabilities. Kerma craftsmen developed distinctive traditions in metalworking, faience production, and ivory carving that demonstrate both technical skill and artistic innovation. Their workshops produced goods for local consumption and for export to Egypt and beyond, creating economic relationships that spread Kerma cultural influence throughout the ancient Near East. The quality of these products indicates specialized training and sophisticated understanding of materials and techniques. The social organization of Kerma society appears to have been hierarchical, with powerful rulers commanding resources and labor on scales that enabled monumental construction and military campaigns. However, evidence also suggests that wealth was more widely distributed than in some contemporary civilizations, with substantial houses and grave goods appearing in contexts beyond obvious elite burials. The conquest of Kerma by Egyptian forces around 1500 BC ended the kingdom's political independence, but did not erase its cultural legacy. Kerma traditions influenced the development of later Nubian kingdoms, including Napata and Meroe, while Kerma's resistance to Egyptian domination became part of Nubian cultural memory that persisted for centuries. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Kerma civilization and its significance in ancient African history. Recent excavations have uncovered additional monumental structures, elaborate burials, and evidence of sophisticated urban planning that confirm Kerma's status as one of ancient Africa's most important civilizations, proving that the Nile Valley supported multiple centers of cultural innovation and political power. The Yamna Culture. Across the vast grasslands stretching from the Black Sea to the Caspian, where endless horizons meet beneath skies that seem to touch the earth, emerged a culture that would reshape the genetic and linguistic landscape of Europe and Asia. The Yamna culture, flourishing between 300 and 2600 BCE, pioneered horse domestication and wheeled transport that revolutionized human mobility and warfare. Their migrations from the Pontic Caspian steppes carried genes and languages that became foundational to populations from Ireland to India, making them arguably the most influential prehistoric culture in shaping modern Eurasia. The Yamna people were among humanity's first true nomadic pastoralists, developing a lifestyle based on herding cattle, sheep, and horses across seasonal grazing territories that stretched for hundreds of miles. This mobile existence required innovations in portable shelter, food preservation, and social organization that allowed communities to thrive without permanent settlements. The freedom of movement provided by this lifestyle gave Yamna groups significant advantages in exploiting resources and responding to environmental changes. The domestication of horses for riding and transport represents one of history's most transformative technological achievements, and the Yamna culture played a crucial role in this development. Archaeological evidence suggests that Yamna peoples were among the first to ride horses rather than merely herding them, opening possibilities for rapid communication, efficient herding, and eventually mounted warfare that would dominate military strategy for millennia. This innovation fundamentally altered human relationships with distance and landscape. Yamna burial practices created the distinctive kurgans that dot the steppe landscape like ancient monuments to forgotten chiefs. These burial mounds, often containing a single individual in a wooden chamber beneath tons of earth and stone, demonstrate beliefs about death and social hierarchy that emphasized individual achievement and status. The grave goods accompanying these burials, including weapons, tools, and ornaments, reveal a society that valued warrior prowess and personal wealth. The invention or adoption of wheeled vehicles by Yamna communities revolutionized transportation and enabled their expansive migrations. Evidence of wagon burials and wheel tracks demonstrates that Yamna peoples could transport entire households across vast distances, carrying possessions, food supplies, and even dismantled dwellings on vehicles pulled by oxen or horses. This mobility allowed rapid population movements that spread Yamna cultural influence across enormous territories. Modern genetic studies have revealed that Yamna migrations into Europe caused massive demographic changes, with Yamna-related ancestry becoming dominant in populations from Britain to Scandinavia within a few centuries. This genetic impact suggests not merely cultural influence but substantial population replacement, fundamentally altering the composition of European populations in ways that persist to the present day. The scale of this demographic transformation makes the Yamna expansion one of prehistory's most significant migration events. The languages spoken by Yamna peoples are believed to be ancestral forms of Indo-European. The language family that includes most modern European languages, Persian, and many languages of India. Linguistic evidence combined with genetic data suggests that Yamna migrations carried these languages across Eurasia, replacing or influencing earlier linguistic traditions and creating the foundation for the most widespread language family in human history. The social organization of Yamna culture appears to have been patriarchal and hierarchical, with powerful male leaders commanding resources and organizing communities for migration and warfare. The emphasis on individual male burials in elaborate kurgans reflects social values that prioritized warrior achievement and patrilineal descent. This social structure may have provided organizational advantages during migrations and conflicts with settled agricultural communities. The material culture of Yamna peoples was relatively simple compared to contemporary agricultural civilizations, reflecting the practical necessities of nomadic life. Their pottery was sturdy but undecorated. Their tools were functional rather than elaborate, and their settlements left minimal archaeological traces. However, this simplicity masked sophisticated knowledge of animal husbandry, navigation, and survival strategies that made their mobile lifestyle successful. The decline of distinctive Yamna culture around 200 and 600 BCE coincided with their transformation into successor cultures that continued nomadic traditions while developing new technologies and social patterns. The Catacomb and Poltavka cultures inherited Yamna territories and lifestyles, adapting to changing environmental and political conditions while maintaining the pastoral nomadism that had made Yamna expansion possible. The legacy of the Yamna culture extends far beyond their immediate temporal and geographical boundaries. Their genetic contributions, linguistic influences, and cultural innovations shaped the development of societies across Eurasia for thousands of years, demonstrating how mobile pastoral peoples could have impacts as profound and lasting as the great agricultural civilizations that dominated ancient history. The funnel beaker culture. Across the forests and coastal plains of northern Europe, where oak and beech trees once dominated landscapes dotted with lakes and streams, emerged the culture that brought agriculture to Scandinavia and northern Germany. The funnel beaker culture, named for their distinctive pottery with flared rims, flourished between 400 300 and 2800 BCE, transforming hunter-gatherer societies into farming communities while building some of Europe's earliest and most impressive megalithic monuments. Their achievement represents one of history's most successful examples of agricultural expansion into territories previously thought unsuitable for farming. The distinctive pottery that gives this culture its name served both practical and ceremonial purposes in funnel beaker society. These vessels, with their characteristic funnel-shaped necks and rounded bodies, appear to have been used for storing and serving food during communal gatherings and ritual feasts. The consistency of form across vast territories suggests shared cultural identity and regular communication between communities separated by hundreds of miles of forest and water. Funnel beaker communities pioneered agricultural techniques adapted to northern Europe's shorter growing seasons and different soil conditions than the Mediterranean regions where farming first developed. They cultivated emmer wheat, barley and peas, while raising cattle, sheep, goats and pigs in mixed farming systems that balanced crop cultivation with animal husbandry. This agricultural foundation supported population growth and the social organization necessary for monumental construction projects. The megalithic monuments constructed by funnel beaker peoples rank among Europe's most impressive prehistoric achievements. Dolmens, passage graves, and long barrows demonstrate sophisticated engineering knowledge and the ability to mobilize community labor for projects that served ritual and social functions. These stone monuments, many still standing after over 5,000 years, testify to the organizational capabilities and spiritual beliefs of their builders. Archaeological evidence reveals that funnel beaker society was organized around principles of collective labor and communal burial that emphasized group identity over individual status. The megalithic tombs typically contain multiple individuals buried over many generations, creating ancestral repositories that connected living communities with their dead in ongoing relationships. This emphasis on collective identity may have facilitated the cooperation necessary for both farming and monument construction. The causewayed enclosures built by funnel beaker communities served as gathering places for seasonal ceremonies, trade activities, and social events that brought together people from wide territories. These sites, surrounded by interrupted ditches and earthen banks, show evidence of feasting, animal sacrifice, and ritual deposition of valuable objects that suggest complex ceremonial practices. The scale of these gatherings indicates social networks that extended far beyond individual settlements. Funnel beaker economies combined agriculture with continued exploitation of wild resources that had sustained earlier hunter-gatherer populations. Fishing, fowling, and gathering wild plants supplemented domestic food production, creating diverse subsistence strategies that provided security against agricultural failures. This flexibility may have been crucial for successful adaptation to Northern Europe's unpredictable climate. The religious practices of funnel beaker peoples centered around elaborate rituals that integrated agricultural cycles with spiritual beliefs about death and ancestry. Evidence suggests ceremonies involving communal feasting, structured deposition of special objects, and ancestor veneration that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity. The investment of enormous labor in tomb construction indicates that beliefs about death and the afterlife played central roles in community life. Funnel beaker craftsmen developed sophisticated ceramic traditions that evolved over centuries, from simple utilitarian vessels to elaborately decorated containers used in ritual contexts. Regional variations in pottery styles suggest local identities within the broader cultural framework, while shared elements indicate regular interaction and cultural exchange between distant communities. The decline of distinctive funnel beaker culture around 200–100 BCE coincided with the arrival of new populations and cultural influences from Eastern Europe. The corded ware and bell beaker cultures introduced new pottery styles, burial practices, and possibly new languages that transformed Northern European societies. However, many funnel beaker agricultural techniques and settlement patterns persisted, influencing the development of later Bronze Age cultures. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of funnel beaker achievement and influence. Recent excavations have uncovered previously unknown monuments and settlements, while analysis of ancient DNA provides insights into the genetic relationships between funnel beaker peoples and neighboring cultures. These discoveries confirm that funnel beaker culture played a crucial role in the agricultural transformation of Northern Europe, establishing farming traditions that have shaped the region's development for over 6,000 years. The Copper Age Iberians. In the sun-drenched landscapes of the Iberian Peninsula, where the Mediterranean meets the Atlantic and mountain ranges separate fertile valleys from arid plateaus, flourished communities that pioneered Europe's first metallurgical revolution. The Copper Age Iberians transformed their societies through mastery of copper working, while building fortified settlements and creating distinctive megalithic monuments that still dot the Spanish and Portuguese countryside. Their achievements in metallurgy, architecture, and social organization established patterns that would influence Iberian development for millennia. The fortified settlements of Copper Age Iberia represent some of Europe's earliest examples of defensive architecture designed to protect communities and their valuable resources. Sites like Los Millayes featured multiple stone walls reinforced with bastions and towers, sophisticated entrance systems, and carefully planned residential areas that demonstrate advanced understanding of military engineering and urban planning. These fortifications suggest a society concerned with defending accumulated wealth from rivals who recognize the value of copper and other resources. The copper metallurgy that defines this period revolutionized tool production and created new forms of wealth that could be accumulated, displayed, and passed between generations. Iberian metalworkers developed techniques for extracting copper from ores, casting tools and weapons in stone molds, and creating ornaments that demonstrated both technical skill and artistic sensibility. This technological advantage gave Copper Age communities significant benefits in agriculture, warfare, and craft production. The megalithic traditions inherited from earlier Neolithic populations continued to evolve during the Copper Age, with communities building elaborate passage tombs and dolmens that served as collective burial places for multiple generations. These monuments, constructed from massive stone slabs arranged to create chambers and passages, demonstrate engineering capabilities and social organization that could mobilize community labor for projects that served spiritual and social functions beyond mere burial. Archaeological evidence reveals increasingly complex social hierarchies developing during the Copper Age, with certain individuals or families accumulating wealth and authority that distinguished them from community members. Elite burials contain copper daggers, elaborate ornaments, and exotic materials obtained through long-distance trade, suggesting social differentiation based on control of metallurgical knowledge, trade networks, or agricultural resources. This emerging inequality marked a significant departure from more egalitarian Neolithic social structures. The distinctive pottery of Copper Age Iberia evolved from earlier traditions while incorporating new forms and decorative techniques that reflected changing social practices and cultural influences. Bell-shaped beakers, decorated vessels, and specialized forms for particular functions suggest increasingly sophisticated ceramic traditions that combined utilitarian purposes with symbolic and ceremonial roles. Regional variations in pottery styles indicate local identities within broader cultural frameworks. Trade networks connected Copper Age Iberian communities with distant regions, bringing exotic materials and cultural influences that enriched local traditions. Ivory from North Africa, amber from Northern Europe, and various minerals from different Iberian regions appear in archaeological contexts, demonstrating commercial relationships that spanned considerable distances. These exchange networks facilitated not only material trade, but also the spread of ideas and technologies. The religious practices of Copper Age Iberians appear to have centered around elaborate ceremonies involving collective ritual activities, offerings to supernatural forces, and ancestor veneration conducted in megalithic monuments. Evidence of feasting, structured deposits of valuable objects, and careful arrangement of human remains suggests complex spiritual beliefs that integrated death, community identity, and relationships with divine powers governing fertility and prosperity. Agricultural intensification during the Copper Age supported growing populations and urban development, with communities developing improved techniques for cultivation, irrigation, and crop storage. The adoption of the plough, use of draft animals, and expansion of cultivated areas increased food production while also creating new forms of property and social relationships based on land ownership and agricultural surplus. The transition from Copper Age to Bronze Age brought new technologies and cultural influences that transformed Iberian societies. The addition of tin to copper created bronze, a harder and more durable metal that offered improved tools and weapons. However, many social and cultural patterns established during the Copper Age persisted, influencing the development of Iberian Bronze Age cultures. Modern archaeological research continues to reveal new aspects of Copper Age Iberian achievement and influence. Recent excavations have uncovered additional fortified settlements, burial monuments, and evidence of metallurgical activities that demonstrate the sophistication and extent of these early metal-using societies, confirming their crucial role in the cultural and technological development of prehistoric Europe. The Beaker Culture. Across Europe's diverse landscapes, from the Mediterranean coast to the British Isles and from the Atlantic shores to Central Europe, spread one of prehistory's most recognizable cultural phenomena. The Beaker culture united disparate communities through shared pottery styles, burial practices and material culture that created a remarkably uniform archaeological signature across vast territories. Their distinctive bell-shaped drinking vessels, elegant stone arrowheads and copper daggers mark a transitional period when metallurgy, individual identity and long-distance connections transformed European societies in profound ways. The Beaker vessels that define this culture represent far more than simple drinking containers. These finely crafted ceramics, with their inverted bell shape and intricate geometric decorations, appear to have held special significance in ritual context involving alcoholic beverages and social ceremonies. The remarkable consistency of form and decoration across enormous geographical distances suggests shared cultural meanings and regular communication between communities separated by hundreds of miles, creating a cultural network that spanned the continent. Archaeological evidence reveals that Beaker culture spread through a combination of population movement and cultural adoption, with genetic studies showing complex patterns of migration and intermarriage that varied significantly between regions. In some areas, like Britain, Beaker expansion involved substantial population replacement, while in other regions, like Iberia, local populations adopted Beaker cultural practices while maintaining genetic continuity with earlier inhabitants. This complex pattern demonstrates the multiple ways cultural traditions can spread across landscape. The association of Beaker materials with individual burials marks a significant shift from earlier communal burial practices toward emphasis on personal identity and achievement. Beaker graves typically contain a single individual accompanied by distinctive artifact sets including pottery, copper daggers, stone wrist guards and archery equipment arranged in standardized patterns. This burial pattern suggests shared beliefs about death, individual status, and the importance of personal possessions in afterlife journeys. Metallurgical knowledge formed a crucial component of Beaker cultural identity, with copper working techniques spreading alongside pottery styles and burial customs. Beaker metalworkers produced daggers, awls and ornaments that demonstrated both technical sophistication and artistic skill, creating objects that served practical functions while also displaying owner wealth and status. Control of metallurgical knowledge may have provided social advantages that facilitated Beaker expansion. The archery equipment found in Beaker burials, including finely crafted stone arrowheads and distinctive stone wrist guards, suggest that archery played important roles in both hunting and warfare. The standardized form of these wrist guards across vast territories indicates shared technological traditions and possibly common training methods that connected Beaker communities through military and sporting practices. This emphasis on archery may have provided tactical advantages during territorial expansion. Beaker settlements show considerable variation in form and organization, reflecting adaptation to diverse environmental conditions across Europe. Some communities maintained mobile pastoral lifestyles, while others established permanent agricultural villages, demonstrating the flexibility of Beaker cultural identity that could accommodate different economic strategies, while maintaining shared material culture and burial practices. The religious and ceremonial significance of Beaker vessels remains somewhat mysterious, but evidence suggests they were used for consuming special beverages during rituals that marked important social occasions. Chemical analysis of vessel residues has detected traces of alcoholic drinks including mead and flavored beers, supporting interpretations that Beaker ceremonies involved communal drinking that reinforced social bonds and cultural identity. Trade networks connecting Beaker communities facilitate exchange of raw materials, finished goods and cultural innovations across unprecedented distances. Copper from Iberian mines, amber from Baltic shores, and exotic stones from various sources appear in Beaker contexts far from their origins, demonstrating commercial relationships that created economic interdependence and cultural connections throughout prehistoric Europe. The gradual transformation of Beaker culture into early Bronze Age societies around 1800 BCE coincided with technological innovations that built upon bell beaker foundations. The addition of tin to copper created bronze, while bell beaker social patterns and trade networks provided frameworks for increasingly complex societies. Rather than disappearing, bell beaker traditions evolved into regional Bronze Age cultures that maintained elements of their cultural heritage. Modern research combining archaeology with genetic analysis continues to reveal new aspects of bell beaker expansion and influence. Recent discoveries demonstrate that bell beaker peoples played crucial roles in shaping the genetic and cultural landscape of modern Europe, establishing patterns of technology, social organization, and cultural exchange that influenced European development for thousands of years, proving that even mobile communities without writing or monumental architecture could leave lasting marks on human history. The corded ware people. Across the forests and river valleys of northern and central Europe, where birch and pine trees once stretched from the Baltic Sea to the Swiss Alps, emerged a culture that fundamentally reshaped the genetic and linguistic landscape of the continent. The corded ware people derived their name from the distinctive cord-impressed decorations on their pottery, but their significance extends far beyond ceramic styles. They were bearers of Indo-European languages, pastoralists who introduced new ways of life, and migrants whose movements created demographic transformations that echo through modern European populations. The pottery that gives corded ware culture its name demonstrates sophisticated ceramic traditions that combined practical functionality with distinctive artistic expression. Vessels decorated with impressions made by twisted cords wrapped around sticks created intricate geometric patterns that varied by region, while maintaining recognizable stylistic unity. These decorative schemes may have conveyed information about community identity, family lineage, or cultural affiliations that helped maintain social connections across dispersed settlements. Archaeological and genetic evidence reveals that corded ware expansion involved substantial population movements from the Pontic-Caspian steppes into Central and Northern Europe, bringing peoples related to the Yamna culture into territories previously inhabited by Neolithic farming communities. This migration represents one of prehistory's most significant demographic events, fundamentally altering the genetic composition of European populations in ways that persist into the present. Modern Europeans from Scandinavia to the Balkans carry substantial corded ware ancestry that reflects this ancient expansion. The subsistence strategies employed by corded ware communities emphasized mobile pastoralism, combined with limited agriculture, representing a shift from the intensive farming practiced by earlier Neolithic populations. They raised cattle, sheep and horses while cultivating crops opportunistically, creating flexible economic systems that allowed movement across large territories in response to seasonal conditions and resource availability. This mobility gave corded ware peoples significant advantages in exploiting diverse environments. Corded ware burial practices featured single grave inhumations with distinctive gender-specific positioning and grave good associations. Males were typically buried on their right side with weapons and tools, while females were placed on their left side with jewelry and domestic items. This standardized pattern, maintained across vast territories, suggests shared cultural beliefs about gender roles, death, and proper treatment of the deceased that unified corded ware communities despite geographical dispersion. The battle axes that frequently accompany corded ware male burials represent both practical weapons and status symbols that communicated information about warrior identity and social position. These carefully crafted stone implements, often made from exotic materials obtained through trade, demonstrate technical skill and aesthetic sensibility that elevated functional tools into artistic expressions. The emphasis on warrior symbolism suggests societies that valued martial prowess and male dominance. The relationship between corded ware and contemporary bell beaker cultures remains debated among archaeologists, with evidence suggesting both competition and interaction between these groups. In some regions, they overlapped chronologically and geographically, potentially engaging trade, conflict, or cultural exchange that influenced the development of both traditions. This interaction between mobile pastoral peoples and more settled communities created dynamic cultural landscapes. The linguistic legacy of corded ware peoples may represent their most enduring contribution to European civilization, Many scholars believe that corded ware expansion carried Indo-European languages into northern and central Europe, establishing linguistic traditions that evolved into Germanic, Baltic, and Slavic language families. If this interpretation is correct, the corded ware migration fundamentally shaped not only European genetics, but also the languages spoken by hundreds of millions of people today. The transition from corded ware to early Bronze Age cultures around 230–50 BCE occurred gradually as technological innovations, population movements, and cultural exchanges transformed European societies. Beaker influences spread into corded ware territories, while corded ware populations adopted new pottery styles and metallurgical techniques, creating hybrid cultures that combined elements from multiple traditions. The social organization of corded ware communities appears to have emphasized patriarchal structures and individual male authority, contrasting with some earlier Neolithic societies that showed more egalitarian patterns. This social transformation may have been connected to the importance of cattle wealth, warrior prowess, and patrilineal inheritance systems that concentrated power in male lineages. Modern research combining archaeology, genetics, and linguistics continues to reveal new aspects of corded ware significance in European prehistory. These peoples stand at a crucial junction in European history, connecting the Neolithic farming communities that first transformed the continent with the Bronze Age societies that would establish patterns of culture and society recognizable in later civilizations. In the quiet forests where they once herded cattle and buried their dead, the corded ware people left genetic, linguistic, and cultural legacies that continue to shape Europe thousands of years after their distinctive pottery disappeared from the archaeological record.